Welcome everybody to the first lock-in of 2021. I didn't think we'd still be doing these 9 months after we first started them as a response to the lockdowns that happened in March. But here we are, we're going to keep these going for as long as we possibly can. You're all very welcome to the first official lock-in of the year. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to be back under a turtleneck, sipping whiskey amongst friends and chatting to interesting people in the Irish whiskey world. So delighted that you could join. Looking forward to tonight, a really special night. We are drinking Dublin whiskey, talking all about Dublin distilling, telling Dublin stories. It's going to be a great night with the Dublin Liberties Distillery. I'm thrilled to be back. I'm thrilled that we're getting to sip some whiskies together. Big night ahead of us tonight. We are squeezing a lot into a few short hours. As always, there's going to be whiskies. We've got 3 great whiskies that we're going to sample and get to know a bit better tonight. There'll be cocktail making, there'll be storytelling, there'll be music. We're going to kick off in a couple of minutes' time by getting the first ever virtual tour of an Irish whiskey distillery. The distilleries are closed to visitors, of course, in Ireland at the moment due to COVID restrictions, but we're getting to see behind the scenes this evening at the Dublin Liberties Distillery. So in a few minutes, we'll be going to Caitriona McAleese, distiller at the distillery, who's going to kindly show us around and introduce us to one of our whiskies tonight. Later on, we will have storytelling. We are going to a secret location in Ireland, a kind of a spooky setup. Wait till you see it on screen, and then you'll know all about it. But we're going to get some great stories from Mr. Hugh Cooney. We'll then be joined later on by Stephanie Shen, Global Whiskey Ambassador with the Dead Rabbit Whiskey, who's going to introduce us to that whiskey. She's going to make some cocktails with us, and we've got some music as well. We've got music from 2 gentlemen who are going to play music for us tonight, Connor and who's it? I have my details here. We've got so many people that we're planning for tonight. We are going to go to Connor and Chris up in Lurgan in Northern Ireland, who are going to play some great music for us tonight. They'll play a few tunes for us. We're going to learn about 3 great whiskies, and I'd love to know what's in your glass tonight. What are you drinking? It's great to see so many familiar faces. Chris says, here we go again. Yeah, we're back at it. Back at it indeed. Kieran, we are back. We are back indeed. That's it. We are back. Dave O'Connell in Dublin is actually awake for Stories and Sips. He's not too far away from the distillery himself. Good man, Dave. Great to see you joining. And Diarmid and Kieran up there in New Jersey drinking away. Good men yourselves. Delighted that you could join us. Shamini in Norway, Happy New Year. Yes, it is a Happy New Year. It's the first time we're saying Happy New Year to you all. Lorcan says, great to see us back. Liberty's Copper Alley is fantastic. That's the 3rd whiskey we're going to try tonight. Stephanie is going to introduce us to Copper Alley later on. So we're going to have a good old tasting with that. Let me see. What do you need to know for tonight? Well, I think it's important that you pour yourself a good whiskey. You get yourself comfortably situated in a comfortable chair. We are going to have a great night, a great session, as we always do. I've got plans for great lock-ins over the coming weeks and months, because no matter what's happening in the world, I think we always need one place where we can go and rely on and count on. That's always going to be there, and that the lock-in turned out to be that in 2020, and 2021 is starting off like we're going to need more than just a lock-in, I'd say, if it keeps going the way it's going. But we'll keep turning up here every Friday as well. Jim is joining us with Writer's Tears. Dave just finished a Powers 3 Swallow. Susie's got some drinks from an event we did on Wednesday. Joe Moore, Dublin Airport, says, no rest for the wicked. Great stuff. Pa Donoghue in Cove, good to see you, Pa. Happy New Year to you. Good to see you as well. Lots of you tuning in with drinks in your glass, and why wouldn't you? All righty, so let me see. We've got our drinks here. All right, in 1 minute, we are going to go over to Caitriona, and Caitriona is going to introduce us to our first whiskey. So get settled in there. Peter says, I need a good fire. It's 85 degrees where I am at the moment, which is about 30 degrees Celsius. The turtleneck is as warm as I'm willing to get. Don't mind your fires. Kieran Quinn has broken the seal on a Middleton Very Rare 2020. Good man. It doesn't matter who made you do it, as long as you've opened your whiskey. And Dave is starting with Dubliner himself. Great stuff. All right. Well, look, why don't we start our night off the right way? Let us go over right now to the distillery and let us bring in Caitriona, distiller at the distillery, to join us. Caitriona, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Well, Barry, how are you?
I'm doing great. You, when you signed up for your night shift, you never thought that you were going to be coming on here and giving tours of the distillery virtually, did you?
I know, not at all, but your luck has to be done.
It has to be done. The Dublin Liberties Distillery course is, I think it's coming up now in its second birthday. Opened early 2019, so almost 2 years in operation. And how long have you been there, Caitriona? When did you join the distillery?
Well, I joined the DLD back in October in 2018, so it was still very much a building site at that stage. All the vessels were in, but that was about the extent of it. So it was a very cold winter, I remember. But we started producing around Valentine's Day then, 2019. So yeah, we're coming up on 2 years now. Time has flown really, but it's great to see the growth of the place. And it was really cool to see the cafe and the bar go in and that accelerate and everything like that. So that was cool to see from the ground up.
It seems like Dublin exploded with whiskey distilleries all of a sudden within the space of a couple of years. We went from 0 to 4 distilleries in the city, which is remarkable growth, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see. It's very handy as well because it was when I was just coming out of my Harry Walk course. I see all this growth and like, yes, planned it well. But no, it's great to see. It's great to see a growth in the category with all the new places opening up. Yeah, it's brilliant.
What got you interested in distilling as a career, Caitriona?
Well, I've always had a keen interest, I suppose, in food science. And manipulation maybe of food. So I did my undergrad in food science, and from there we touched on fermentation and fermented food and everything like that. So I just looked into that more, and the course came up there in Harriet Watt, and I kind of just jumped in not knowing how much of a whole world it was in itself, and was really just like blown away by the scale of it. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, but it's been great.
We talked just last year, the last podcast of the year for Stories and Sips. We talked to Darren McAleese, of course, master distiller at the Dublin Liberties Distillery, and he was helping us understand his thoughts into how to build out a whiskey portfolio and what he wanted to distill. So he has left the distillery in your safe hands. Is that a smart move for him, or is he in trouble?
Oh, no pressure. No. I'm one of 5, so we're all trained up now, and it's been great. It's been great working under Darryl, and it's been great working under John Park as well. These guys have decades of experience in the industry, so any little problems they can solve straight away. So it's really just a matter of being a sponge underneath them and trying to learn as much as you can, because they're just a fountain of knowledge, really.
It seems like you would have graduated then at this perfect time where you get to work under one of the very few master distillers who can call themselves a master distiller with 20 plus years of distilling under their belts, and have a new distillery to work at the same time. Yeah,
I know. I'm not normally a lucky person, so I don't know what happened there, but I absolutely jumped at the chance. So yeah, it was great.
When there's 3 different brands really from the distillery, really, aren't there? There's the lineup, the Dubliner lineup of whiskies and liqueurs. There's the Dead Rabbit whiskey, and there's the Copper. There's the Liberties whiskies as well. Before we take our little tour this evening, which you've been kind to do at midnight in Ireland to walk us through the distillery, we're going to take a little sample, aren't we, of the Dubliner bourbon cask to begin with?
Yeah, exactly. So it comes in this lovely kind of Celtic bottle. But here we are here. So it's a Dubliner bourbon cask, and it is a blend. Sorry, I'm like inverted. It's a blend of single malt and grain whiskies, and matured in bourbon barrels. So what we say with this here is that it is a great introduction whiskey, and that it's very approachable. It's really smooth, light-bodied, very easy drinking, really. So if you were to take a nose of it there. It's got lovely grassy apple juice aroma to it, and it's got that lovely colour. Yeah, isn't it? It just smells like apple juice.
Yeah, the apple juice is strong, all right, on the nose, isn't it? Now that you mentioned it, I love hearing from distillers when they identify a note that I might not have thought of before, and then you can't get that out of your head once you identify it.
Every time I smell it, I just smell apple juice, but yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, it's very mellow, very smooth, and silky.
This is the introduction to the range, then, is it, Caitriona? This is the entry level of the Dubliner range.
It's a great way to, I suppose, dip your toe in the Irish whiskey category as such. It's a very non-offensive whiskey, you know. It's very easy drinking.
You've got a different label on yours than I have on mine. You've got a big green shield. I've got a white one.
Celtic
Same
one
bottle
going
now.
on. Yeah, and it's 40%, so it's not going to blow your head off.
It's not. In fact, I got another bottle here as well. This is going through a rebrand at the moment, so there's a third version of this as well. This one is empty. I didn't drink all this now myself, I assure you, but that's the new bottle, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the new one. Yeah. So
is that on the shelves yet in Dublin?
I don't think so, to be honest.
No.
I'd have to double check, but yeah, just going for a new image rehaul, really. But I do. I like the Celtic kind of influence here, to be honest. That's lovely.
It's light. It's. Would you mix this with cocktails, or is that a?
You can. Yeah. Very much so. An old fashioned or an Irish coffee or anything like that. That would make a great base.
Somebody mentioned there, Paul Andrew, the honeycomb flavor Dubliner is amazing. So the first thing when I did the tour last year, I walked through, and the first thing you actually get to taste isn't the whiskey at all, but it's the liqueur. You get surprised with a little sample. This is let me see if people can see that. This is a honeycomb liqueur, which has turned out to be very popular. Yeah,
lovely and sweet. Yeah, great for cocktails as well.
30%, so not a whiskey, but a whiskey blended with honeycomb flavor, honeycomb liqueur.
Sweeten it up a bit.
Some big fans of that. I wanted us to start off with a little drink in our glass, so that we wouldn't be thirsty like as you're walking us around the distillery, because you're going to be talking a lot about what you're showing us, and you need to have the thirst quenched before you do it. Like
you'll get hungry.
Did you grow up in Dublin yourself, Caitriona?
I did actually, yeah. So I'm from Rathfarnham, so it's not too far from. I get the bus straight into town. It's very handy, so it's not too far from here at all. And my mom grew up in the Liberties until she was about 9, and then moved out to Tallaght. So as soon as I started in this place, she brought me around to her old home where she used to live. So she was chuffed that I've kind of come back, I suppose.
Is there any history of distilling in the family, or any work in the whiskey industry at all?
Just a deep love. No actual
Just a deep love.
Just a very much deep love amongst my uncles and my dad. So yeah, they were delighted as well.
It's there aren't many women distillers in the industry yet. Something that I see a lot. There seems to be a lot more interest now. I see graduating classes at Heriot Watt are filled with women, as they should be. Why historically was there just not the roles available historically? What has changed that there's such an interest now, do you think?
I think it's just the way sometimes it is. Like, for instance, the nursing in Ireland will be dominated by women. It's just, I don't know really, but when I was there there was about 120 students in my year, and probably about maybe 30-ish, maybe 40 girls. So it was definitely dominated by men, but more women than I thought there would be, which is great to see. I think maybe there might be this bit of stigma, or a bit of, in terms of which college course you go into. It's great to see women now choosing more engineering-based courses and everything like that. Yeah. Like, why not? But it's been funny. Like, it's been funny being a female distiller, especially on the forklift, on the forklift out on the road. The looks you get, honest to God. But it's been funny, sure. That's all you can say.
I'm sure this generation of new entrants into the whiskey world now will be held up as role models for the next generation, as I suppose each generation before them. You kind of look to those that have gone past. It's great now to see that there'll be at least some diversity in the world of whiskey as well.
Absolutely, why not? It was great to see a female team in Rowan Co as well. So that was a bit of a
that's right. Yeah,
that was kind of groundbreaking, I suppose. So that's kind of cool to see. So yeah, it should be. Why not? Like, a bit of a mix.
Long may continue.
Yeah, I'm one of 2 female distillers here, and then there's 3 lads. So it's a good
Very
mix.
Good. Mm-hmm. Now, whereabouts are you in the distillery at the moment?
So I'm currently in the mash house. So this will be kind of the primary stages of the whole process.
Well, why don't I put it into your capable hands? So to give us a little impromptu tour. Obviously, we're trying to squeeze a lot into a short period of time, but maybe you could hit up the hot spots for us within the distillery and give us an idea, help our American audience understand how it all works.
Perfect. I'll just clear my way here.
Lovely.
So yeah, as I said, I'm in the mash house. Thankfully, it is quite quiet at the minute, so I will take advantage of that. So the first stages of the process would be milling. So that is just behind me here. So I'll go show you the mill.
Nobody expected to see that.
There you go.
So that's bringing the grain in from outside on the street, isn't it? The grain trucks roll up outside.
Yeah,
and the grain is then brought in.
Yeah. Pretty cool to see, actually. But by the time the trailer fully empties, the hydraulic arm pushes it up to nearly like a 45-degree angle. So it's quite something to see. But that happens weekly. So if you see this, I'm like inverted, sorry. You see this white box structure there? That's our malt feed hopper, which underneath connects to our 4-roller mill. And behind that silver structure is our 30-ton malt bin. So that's where we will store our malt. That's where the malt delivery gets blown in from the road once a week, roughly 28 tons, and it's stored in there until we're ready to go. So, and then in terms of when we're ready to go and we're ready to brew, the first thing I will do, there's a little magnet just above the feed hopper there. So I'll pull that out, really strong magnet, and it's supposed to catch any form of debris, dust, tiny stones or anything that might have passed through. So I'll just give that a clean. And then we can go tell the program to release 2 tons of malt from here up into the feed hopper and then down and be crushed by the rollers to make our grist. Then that grist travels up a conveyor into another grist hopper and awaits availability for the louder ton. So
very good. Yeah,
it's at this point that the grist then will exit the mill house and enter where I am now, which is the mash house, via this guy. So I will just take you over here so you can have a look at the louder ton.
We'll put you up full screen there so people can see it.
Great. Okay. So this is the louder ton. So this is the vessel that we are going to brew with. Sorry. There we go. So that white shaft there, there's a screw inside, and that's going to carry the grain in where it's going to enter the louder ton then. So this point here, that's a hydrator. That's where we're going to have all of our hot liquor or our hot water, and that's where the 2 meet, fall down into the louder ton and create that porridge-like consistency of the mash. So from this louder ton, we can expect a 10,000 litre brew with the 2 tons of grain. And all in all, the whole process takes about 6 hours from start to finish. And yeah, so inside there, we have a false bed with perforated plates through which we can pull our wort down from the mash and into our selected washbacks, just behind me here. So I'll turn you around. So, yeah, so once all the grain is in, basically, in the louder ton, sorry, I don't want to get my head in the way.
You're grand.
In the louder ton, we are really trying to get an internal temperature of 65 degrees Celsius for the gelatinization of starch. So that granule is going to start to break down and release the fermentable sugars. And it's those sugars that the yeast is going to consume and create the alcohol throughout the fermentation. So we do that by temperature control to basically wake up the native enzymes within the grain to do all that. So that's during our mash rest for about half an hour for that. And then we can start loudering off into the fermenters, which are these guys. So these are all our lovely tanks, as you can see. So lovely. I have 5 fermenters in total. I have 2 short ones here and 3 tall, slim ones at the back. They all have a capacity of 20,000 litres. So that will hold 2 brews worth. And the first thing that we do when the brewing in the louder ton is finished is take a sample of these washbacks so we can have our pH, our temperature, and our starting specific gravity. So that specific gravity value will relate to the sugars, basically in the wort. So we want it really sugary. We want a high starting point so that we can get as much out as we can. And all in all, we are aiming for the strength of these fermenters to be about 8% by the time we're going to empty one of them and put it into the wash still in the still house. Does anyone make sense?
That's amazing, yeah. It feels like we're right there. You've got Americans on the edge of their seats thinking they're sitting in a distillery.
Yeah, I know. It's lovely. It's lovely actually in here. Yeah. So that's that. So that's my 5 tanks. And then that is our hot liquor tank, as you can see. So that's where our hot water is stored. We have a bit of heat recovery within the process. So we have a heat exchanger down below. That is going to help us take the heat from the really hot wort. It's too hot for the yeast to be pitched to it. It's coming out at about 62, 63 degrees, and that's too hot for the yeast. So we need to cool that down. So we basically use that hot wort to heat up our cold water so that we can have hot water and cold wort. So we swap the heat energy there. And similarly, the last tank there at the front is not a fermenter. He's a pot ale charger. So something similar will happen in that we are doing heat recovery in transferring the very hot pot ale, which is your liquid waste after the wash distillation, against your cold brews going into the wash still. So they're getting preheated and that pot ale is getting cooled down. So we can then put it into the yard and wait for it to be collected.
What happens, the pot ale, does that have a use in agriculture or anything after it's discarded?
Yeah, exactly. So pot ale can either be fed to pigs or it can be spread on the land. So ours is spread on the land, and then our spent grains as well, which is our solid grains left in the lauter tun at the end of a brew. They are also collected. We would basically have 2 tons of grain for every brew. So we have a collection every day of about 4 tons of grain that goes out in the forklift, collected by a tractor and a trailer, and then that goes for cattle feed. So the guys that look after that, they collect our pot ale and our spent grains, and it goes towards helping agriculture.
Susie says this is so much better than all the tours she's ever done in bourbon country or distilleries in Ireland. So you're already 5 stars already. You're going to get good TripAdvisor reviews now tonight.
Nice. Pat on the back. Okay. So basically then once we're ready to start distilling, it'll be about after 72 hours or so. The fermentation has died off and we're ready to go. So that means I'll have to bring you into the still house now, which is in another room. So say goodbye.
Great.
To the house now. So this
Lovely.
is the still house through these 2 doors here. Now, these are our lovely stills, as you can see.
There we go.
Sorry, I steady myself there. Now, so this is our largest still. That's our 10,000 litre wash still. Second, we have our 6,000 litre intermediate or strong faint still. And then lastly, we have our 6,000 litre spirit still. So triple distilled. And in doing that, every time you're purifying the spirit, you're getting that smooth, characteristic Irish whiskey lightness, basically. So the whole idea in here is that we are concentrating up the alcohol that we created in the brew house by evaporation and condensation. And that would involve filling 1 brew into the wash still, so 10,000 litres, boiling that up. The alcoholic vapours will rise. They'll go up towards the neck of the still, down the line arm, and this guy here at the back is a condenser. So he's going to condense that vapour into liquid. That liquid then flows into our spirit safe here, and then down below. So each still has its own receiver tank that collects all of the volume produced. So with the wash still then, we normally have a run of about 9 hours, and it runs until a final ABV of 2%, creating our low wines. So that is the volume that goes into the first receiver, low wines, and it's about 25% in strength. So that's the first run. Now, the second guy, which is the intermediate or strong faint still, that's going to use the volume created in the first still. So that's going to take those low wines and we'll fill it into there. And this is where the process gets a little bit more complicated, in that the run is divided into 2 fractions. So the first volume collected off this still will be known as strong faints. It is collected into the second receiver, and it's at a higher ABV, roughly around 72%. So this is where you can kind of see the alcohol concentrating up and getting stronger. So we have our strong feints coming out of here, and the process has been automated such that after a cut point of 62%, it will redirect the flow and send the rest of whatever comes off that still into the first receiver to be redistilled again. So it takes two runs of the middle still to create enough volume of strong feints in order to charge the last still, which is the spirit still. So, still with me?
Still with you.
Still with
Amazing.
me.
You're killing it. Killing it.
So the last one now is the faint still, arguably the most important still. And you can actually see the color difference maybe in the light. You can see how much more rose gold this guy is. To these poor stills, we absolutely run into the ground. So this guy is run maybe every other day, every second day, by the time we have enough volume. So he still has quite retained its original copper color. Because it dulls over time with the amount of heat that you're pumping into the poor stills. So at the minute, I'm actually doing a spirit run. So to describe the spirit run, it functions similarly to the intermediate still, in that the run is divided into sections again. So we have our heads, our hearts, and our tails. So the heads has been automated by the system because we wouldn't be tasting that. That kind of has your nastier compounds like methanol and acetone and everything like that. So it's roughly about 64 litres passes, and it is immediately sent back into the second receiver to be redistilled again. So we don't want that in our potable spirit down below because it will just taint the batch and it will taste horrible. So after that cut point has been made, the software then will redirect the flow into the third and the final receiver, which is your spirit receiver and your potable spirit. And this will run now. This is where the distiller intervenes in the whole automation process. So this is where we would taste the spirit ourselves and make the judgment call on the cut. So we do have information from the computer to let us know a general point at which to go up and taste, but it is up to us at the end of the day to make the cut to tails and then direct the rest back into the second receiver to be redistilled again. So you're constantly sending stuff back and forward to get the cleanest, brightest spirit out as you can.
Caitriona, does the spirit flow automatically to the third still without you as a distiller nosing or tasting at the safe, or does it require you to say it's time to go forward or it's time to go back and be redistilled?
So it will redirect the first part. So it'll redirect the heads by itself, and that's at a set point volume wise. And then it will just start flowing all into the third receiver. And then I have to tell the system, okay, stop now, go back and finish out your run in another receiver, not the one down below, because we want that to be as clear and as just as bright as possible. We don't want any negative tailsy kind of notes to it.
When you talk about the difference between the automation and then the manual, not so much interference, but the manual art and skill of going in and determining what is the automated side. Is it that based on a certain volume that has gone through there, we know that at certain heat for a certain time of distillation, once it gets to X in volume, that should be the time to automatically cut the heads off, or is that where the automation is set up based on volume more than anything?
Yeah. So the head fraction for the spirit still, that's based on volume. And then for the intermediate still, that's based on live ABV. So we kind of want our strong feints to be in the 70% region of strength. And then, so once it falls below 62, it'll just send it back and finish it out again to be redistilled again. And the spirit comes out of our spirit still at 86%. So it's quite high.
86%. Okay. And that is high. And that's too high to go into a cask, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, very much so. So in terms of then transferring, so we would have the third receiver, and normally this transfer would be witnessed by revenue, but with COVID, not the case. But beforehand, our revenue officer was probably here about 2 or 3 times a week to witness that transfer of volume from here out to a larger holding tank in the yard. And then from there, we will slowly creep towards cask strength by water additions. So we transfer over and we do one water addition, and then closer to the time of a spirit tanker collection, which is bi-weekly now at this stage, we would spend one whole shift bringing it, really creeping it down, because it takes just the smallest amount of liquid to, it has to be 63.4%, and we have a small margin, so it doesn't take a lot to go beyond that. Need to be careful.
That's fascinating. There's lots of questions coming in, and I see some questions. Sometimes I see threaded questions where people are answering some questions that get raised in there. But for those of you that do have questions for Caitriona while she's here in the distillery and at the stills, please put them in there, and we'll pose them to her. I have a question regarding the transfer to the casks. Then, so we bring the alcohol by volume of the spirit down. Is there a certain ABV that would starts to eat away at the cask? Like, there's a reason we bring it down to that 63 or 64%. Is it solely based on flavor, or is it based on the destruction potential of the cask as well?
Well, there's a chemical reaction going on. So it's like, it's to do with which kind of wood flavors you're extracting from the cask itself. So 63.4 seems to be a bit of a sweet spot, but the higher in strength, the more solvent compounds you're going to leach out, like water soluble and then solvent soluble. So you're going to leach out different compounds depending on which cask strength to go in. So it goes in at 63.4, and then obviously over the course of time, you'll lose a bit for evaporation. And then that's why your cask strength stuff is about 57 or so, something like that. So it's just really about the sweet spot in terms of which chemicals you're trying to leach out of the wood and how that will affect the flavor profile. Yeah. Very good.
Very good. You're making, it's 100% single malt that's being made there, isn't it, in the distillery? Tatsuya had a question, do you make pot still whiskey? But you're making 100% malt whiskey, single malt at DLD.
Yeah, at the minute, 100% single malt. We don't, at the minute, have space. We would need another silo if we were going to do pot still. We'd probably need another silo just to separate the malted and the unmalted barley. And at the minute, we just have enough space for what we have, but maybe if we were to expand in the future, that could be a potential product that we'd be making.
And to emphasize just the space, I mean, this is the Dublin type distillery of old, the urban city distillery, surrounded by homes, businesses. I remember staying in the hotel across the street, in the Aloft Hotel, and looking down and seeing traffic at a standstill because the grain delivery was happening. It's that tight. Like, that's how much space you have there.
Absolutely. It's so tight. But it's funny. It kind of adds to the character. I mean, I remember before I went up to the roof just to have a look at something or other, and you're right beside the apartments. You could feel someone. I could feel someone looking at me. So I just kind of looked over, and there's just a man on his balcony. It's just like, so you really are. We're quite compact, and but yeah, we've made the most of our space, I suppose. What we're given, It's an old building now. In fairness, it's over 400 years old, so it's a bit spooky in here. But yeah, we've done our best.
That's amazing, yeah. And I know we're going to touch on the dark history of the Liberties area and how that's kind of been utilized in the brand and in the whiskies that have been put to market so far. We'll be talking to Stephanie later on. She's going to share some of those stories. When it comes to distilling and blending and maturation, there seems to be there's always a position people take in the industry as to whether the distilling is kind of the scientific part, and the blending and the maturation is kind of the artistic part, the more romantic part. What way do you look at it?
Oh, I understand. I mean, we are working with machines, and it is like a biological process, I suppose, in a sense. I don't know, I'd probably agree with that in terms of knowing what's going to work and training your nose and your taste profile. It's difficult, and it takes years and years of practice. So to be a blender and have that so finely tuned in, it really is something to be like, wow. But yeah, I suppose distillation it's very much every day. Like, the nature of this job is quite socially distant anyway. I just work with stills and tanks and machines all day. So yeah, it is very specific. Yeah.
Aside from the manual nosing and sampling at the safe, what are you looking out for when you're doing a night shift? Like, what could go wrong? We don't want anything to go wrong, but what could go wrong? Where do you start?
Oh God. So the brew. Basically, if your brew goes wrong, that's just you know when your blood goes cold and your stomach sinks, that's just a whole load of work to try fix that. So it really is watching the temperature as you mash in is so important. If you mash in cold, it's an absolute disaster. You'll have a stuck mash. You'll probably need a slurry tank to take it out because it won't drain. It's just a holy show. So it really is monitoring temperatures and volumes. So even though it's automated, it's just Murphy's Law. When you're not looking at a screen, something happens and you add extra or it goes in cold or there's something like that. So even though it is automated, you do need to really pay attention.
Right. And the brew is where you're getting your flavor, isn't it? And the distillation then is where you're concentrating that flavor along the way. But if the brew goes wrong, there's no fixing it with distillation, is there?
Well, I mean, you can only really dress something up if your starting liquid isn't great. You can't really dress it up that much, and it's the same. You're trying to get as much alcohol in the fermentation as possible, and it'll be reflected in your distillations. In that your yield would just be way off. You'll be way lower, even if you had a brew of about 6%. That's a massive increase or decrease in your alcoholic yield at the end. So they're all linked. It's a whole chain process. So if one obstacle falls, they all do, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. Like Christmas lights. One goes, they all go.
Yeah, literally.
We have one question that's come in from Steve, and he asks about the shape of the stills, and he says that the condensers look larger than most that he's seen, and the tanks look smaller. Is there? Do you have any information you can share on the shape of the stills and what that means for the final distillate?
Well, we have we got these stills from Carl in Germany. But yeah, you're right about the condensers. We've had to adapt, I suppose, a bit. You know, in the commissioning phase, it was a bit difficult trying to get everything sorted. Like with the shape of this still, we were having an awful trouble with a whirlpool inside. So it was fobbing a lot, meaning that it was foaming and it was just being carried up the neck. So we needed to add a few bits, tweak a few bits, add some baffle plates. Initially, you can see as well, like normally our spirit still would be smaller. Like it's the same size as our intermediate still, whereas normally it would be the smallest of all the stills. And that was because initially, I think the idea was to mirror a method in the Bushmill distillation whereby they used it as a rider system, but that was quickly abandoned in commissioning and we just did it the traditional method. So there's been a bit of chopping and changing, but yeah, it's kind of just working with what you have. And
it's not often mentioned how impactful the shape of the stills, the size of the stills, that is so important in what you get at the final stage of the distillate in the glass.
Yeah, exactly. So you have like reflux, it's called, whereby you can kind of see in that little sight glass there, it's trickling back down, and in the vapor is coming up, touching the sides and coming back down. Every time you're kind of getting a bit of purification. You're getting the heavy congeners are kind of being reboiled off, and the lighter ones are going out, and you're just getting a smoother note to your spirit at the end of the day. So you want reflux basically.
What about the water then that goes into the brew to begin with? There's often interesting arguments about the importance of the water, but the water is it deionized, demineralized before it's used? Help us understand water's role and its source in distillation.
Yeah. So we use a combination of borehole water. So there's actually a natural reservoir underneath this area that we kind of tap into. We also have it set up in that we can blend with mains water if needs be. So we would just use normal process water for our mashing in, and that has been softened. And then in terms of the water that's added to the spirit, that's really important. It has to be purified through RO. It's called RO water, reverse osmosis. So you're trying to avoid any kind of tainted flavors that would be in the water entering your spirit. So you just want to bring down the ABV. You don't want to add anything else. It's perfect as is. So that needs to be treated, and that goes through a reverse osmosis area in this distillery downstairs.
Amazing. I'm seeing the comments coming in. People absolutely bowled over and impressed with the knowledge. I don't think there's a question we can throw at you that you're not going to be able to answer. Flying the flag well for DLD tonight. Let me see what other questions came in.
Well, so.
Brilliant, absolutely amazing tour for us. We could talk all night. Brian wants to know if there's any plans yet for the first release. Of course, you've only been distilling now 2 years, so not even close really to being even legally whiskey yet, are you?
I know, yeah, it's still a bit to go. We actually had a sample brought into us there of must have been our 18th month or something like that, and it was lovely. If I do say so myself, it was actually gorgeous. It was really fruity and caramelly, and there's such a lovely color on it. But yeah, it's only about half. I think it was 18 months, so there's still a good bit to go before we can legally say and then carry on. But yeah, it was really nice.
Well, that's good to hear. Good progress report there. We'll keep an eye out for it. Before I let you go, and I know you have far more important things to be doing than entertaining a bunch of drunken yahoos on a Friday night, but I'm curious to know of the lineup of whiskies now that are being put out there by the Dublin Liberties Distillery. If you had to choose one favorite child, which one would you sip on if you could only have one on your desert island? I
am partial to the Murder Lane. I think that's lovely. That's the
13-year-old, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a 13-year-old with I think it's a bourbon and a Tokai dessert wine cask finish. I think that's lovely. It's really kind of marzipan-y, almondy kind of, so that's up my street anyway. So I'd tip away at that, so I would.
I had a sample of that when I visited last year, all right, and it was gorgeous altogether. Yeah, lovely. Yeah. We're all hoping that the world opens up again soon and we can come and visit in person and we can sit and have drinks at the bar and we can buy from the gift shop. So hopefully when that does happen, we'll all we'll bring a whole load of Americans over to see you. Brilliant. Open invitation there. You heard it, folks. Well, we're going to go in a minute to Hugh Cooney. Our storyteller is going to regale us with tales from Ireland. But Caitriona, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're in the middle of a night shift trying to keep an eye on things, but to go to this level of detail for us and just generosity of time has been amazing. So really want to thank you for it.
Great. Thanks so much.
And sláinte, and we'll see you hopefully soon.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks a minute, Caitriona. Amazing. How about that? So many questions we could have spent all night talking to Caitriona. Maybe we should have her back on again. But what an amazing little short tour there. I don't think there was a question we could have asked that she couldn't have answered, which was amazing to see. I mentioned that last year we had our last podcast for Stories and Sips of the year was with Master Distiller Darren McAleese, who had spent 20 years of his distilling career at Bushmills prior to helping launch the Dublin Liberties Distillery. Darryl has some fantastic information and behind the scenes nuggets and tidbits that if you're interested in how the distillery got started, if you're interested in how they arrived at their whiskey program and how they decided about what they're going to release, what makes a good master distiller, I encourage you to go to storiesandsips.com and click on the stories tab and you will see the first podcast there because it's the last one of last year will be with Darren McAleese. So really worth listening to. Yeah, what an amazing tour. What a great start we're off to tonight. So we're not going to stop. Let me look at the questions before we go to our secret location in Ireland for our next segment. I've poured myself another drop of the Dubliner, which I'm going to sip on until Stephanie comes in later and introduces us to the Dead Rabbit, which we're going to sip on a little bit more. But that was, that was a great segment altogether. All right, let me see any questions here. Yeah, so I'll ask the distillery team to have a look at the comments here as well over the next few days and see if they can answer some of the questions that maybe we didn't get to. So many were coming in, but we'll see if we can get some of those questions answered for you all. Lots of technical questions as there should be when we have a distiller on hand. Andrew wants to know if my notes will be available. I've got my pen here taking my notes. Yes, my notes will be available in 17 languages in all good bookstores as soon as this broadcast is over, Andrew. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. All righty, we're off to a good start. So without further ado, let us have some stories because after all, this lock-in is about stories and sips. We just had some sips and some education on distilling. Now it's time to go to a remote location and bring in our storyteller for the night, looking like he just came in out of the woods. Hugh Cooney, how are you?
Hi, how you doing? How's everybody?
Hello, you're very welcome. How are you?
Oh, thank you. I'm good. I'm good. It's a bit. It's a bit nippy. I'm in a. I'm in a kind of. I'm in an old family place that's being. It needs a lot of work on it. I'm currently kind of caretaker here, and I'm living in the barn at the back. But I've come into the good room here to spin you some yarns because it's good. It's good setting.
It's not often we come live to somebody who's in an Aran sweater holding a shillelagh as if they're like something out of the 1950s about to attack us.
I know. I thought I'd turn the paddy whackery up to 90 for this one, but I've got the shillelagh and the Aran jumper. I was a storyteller in London for 6 years, and that's where I kind of I cut my craft. But I found that these accoutrements go hand in hand, and they're good tools of the trade. Now it's never tasted any blood now, this shillelagh, but
the night is young.
The night is young. This is it, and sure, who knows? We have enough. If we have enough whiskey, we might have a row later on.
I want to interject here and say this is the segment of the night that I have no idea what is going to happen, because I have never seen such a random assortment of backgrounds and gloves and sweaters and sticks, and there's no telling where this segment can go. And I'm putting complete and maybe naive faith and trust in your hands, in your gloved hands, Hugh.
That's where you've made your first mistake, but yeah, no, it's just there's some great stories. I'm from a place called Blessington, and it's actually Blessington Lake. Now there's a famous man from that area, and he's only known, no one really knows his name anymore. He's known as the Tay Man. And if you're familiar with the Tay, do you know what the Tay is?
Cup of tea.
Yeah. It's like the Tay. It's the exact same as the tea, but you just swap the A and the E. But yeah, it's a place called Ballinahown. Now, the Poulafuca Reservoir in Blessington it was a hydroelectric plant built in the 1940s, and they basically plugged up the end of the valley, and they bought all the land from everybody, and they filled the lake up. And the little known thing about the lake is that it's actually known as Ireland's Taypot. And it's based on this man and this story. The Tay Man, people said he wasn't that smart, that he didn't have much going on upstairs, but that he had everything going for him, absolutely everything. And he was the best footballer, and he was the best looking in the village. And he had his pick of whatever he wanted. Now, he didn't have much money to his name, but he had the pick of the women. But despite that, he fell in love with this particular girl, and she was said to have made a really, really gorgeous soda bread. And that was one of the many things that brought their relationship along and their love together. But now you're talking about a time in Ireland, where the Tay was delivered. You couldn't get the Tay in the shops. Imagine that. You couldn't get the Tay in the shops. You could only get the Tay delivered by a specialist individual known as the Tay Man. Now, our hero in this story, she was married off to a man of land. Now, the Tay man didn't have much going for him, so he had to sit by and watch this happen. And then they said that he kind of fell from grace because he started, he was very fond of the soda bread and the Tay, and he started kind of packing on the pounds, and he was a bit of a laughing stock in the area. But then when the Tay went big, he became the Tay man. And so, you know, he started to get a bit of gravitas, you know, about his person. And the Tay man delivered the Tay by horse and cart, but the Tay was not the only thing he delivered. Do you know what I'm saying? That's right. He delivered the news as well. I know what you're thinking, but he delivered the news. It was kind of like if you imagine him as a kind of like dial-up internet at the time, very slow. You go from house to house. He'd sample the Tay, he'd sample the soda bread, and him and his horse Martin would. His horse Martin was very fond of oats, and Martin and himself would stop off. He'd sample. They say don't get high on your own supply, but the Tay man was breaking all the rules. He was on the Tay all day, every day. He'd stop off. He'd have the Tay. He'd sample the soda bread, and just all the while thinking, this is just not as good as her soda bread. But she was on the Tay round, and that's kind of why he became the Tay man, because she was on the end of the round. So what he liked to do is he would do the Tay round, and then he'd go to her house and linger, you know, hang around a bit, you know, a little bit unhealthy, you know. You shouldn't really be doing that, you know. You should really just, you should just pack it in at that stage, shouldn't you really? But he wasn't going to quit the Tay man, and he wasn't. They said he wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. But this one particular Tay round, now the Tay man, he built up this Tay empire. He had the Tay, he was selling it like the only man, and he was such a big, formidable man that no one would go against him. No one else would dare sell the Tay. So he was selling Tay all around, and he was cleaning up. So your man, the man of land, who was married to his, he was starting to feel a bit of a threat here. He's like, hold on a minute now. This lad's not as much of a laughing stock as he used to be. He's got this, he had a Tay warehouse. Now that was right in the center of the valley, this warehouse. And it was packed to the roof with sacks of, guess what?
Tay.
Tay, that's right. So it was absolutely packed with Tay. Now this Tay round, him and the horse Martin, it was raining cats and dogs. You know, it was coming sideways, and he was absolutely soaked. And he was looking back at the trap, and the water running through the sacks of Tay, and the Tay pissing out the back of the car. Jesus Christ, what a waste. And then he's going along in the cart, and it's getting dark, and he can't see a thing, and he was like, he's just determined to get to her house, absolutely determined. So he comes to a bridge with Martin, the horse Martin. Now Martin was fond of the oats, and the three of them, the size of them, it said that the Tay man was the biggest out of the three, the horse, the cart, and himself. And they got to the bridge, and he was trying to send him over this little wooden rickety bridge, and the water was coming up over the bridge, and the horse looked back at him as if to say, you must be fucking mad if you think I'm going to be going over that bridge. So the Tay man said, on Martin, oats for Martin. And Jesus, the horse went across quick enough. And then the bridge came away anyway, very Hollywood style, you know, like just it broke into bits and went away. But that was when he started to think. He's like, Jesus. He's on his way up to this little farm, and he's like, I'm going to be up there for the night. So he made his way up, and he could see the little lights in the distance, just the little squares of light of the cottage as he got up. He got up there, still raining and raining, and he got up there, tied up the horse, and he knocked on the door. And he knocked on the door, and then the door opened, and the little husband was there at the door. And he got a fright. He went, oh, Jesus! The formidable size of the Tay man darkening the door. Anyway, you'd think them being rivals in love, that the Tay man would get a frosty reception, but this is the Tay man, and hospitality being paramount in these times, the ancient laws of hospitality dictated that the Tay man had to be looked after. Now, he had to be looked after, but if he wasn't looked after, who better to spread the news about the scant hospitality than the Tay man himself? You know what I mean?
The husband was stuck.
That's it. He's got to put on a brave face, put on a show, and you know, he knows, but he knew there was still something going on between his, you know, the eyes with the wife, and so he's having this Tay man into the house. Anyway, the Tay man comes in drenched to the bone, and he's stripped down to his jocks. And he's put in front of a roaring fire, unlike this one, which is, it's actually, you can probably see my breath here, it's freezing. Anyway, but he's put there in front of the fire, bollock naked. And he's put a little blanket over his shoulders for modesty. This formidable Tay man, and a whiskey, dead rabbit nonetheless, put into his hand. And he's there, and it doesn't get much better than this now. He's there. And anyway, the husband busies himself. He goes outside, and he gets Martin. He ties Martin up, brings Martin, takes him, unholsters him, and puts him into the shed at the gable end of the house. Now, it's now a bit of galvanized across the top of the roof, and it's left a shed. It's a dangerous old yoke anyway, but the horse is in there. He's cozy enough, and sure enough, he gets his oats. And so then the Tay man's there, but he's in the house on his own. But then she emerges from the bedroom, and she sachets across the flagstones over to the Tay man, over and past the Tay man. And she goes over to this stone shelf above the fire. She pulls out this big, dusty loaf, big wheel of soda bread across the middle. And the Tay man, Jesus, his teeth are swimming inside of his head for the want of a bite of it. So he's there, the Tay man. He doesn't know what's going on. It's her there, the soda bread. He's drinking the whiskey, and he doesn't know. It's sensory overload for him, really. So he's there, and she comes out. She comes over with the wheel of soda bread. And she goes, "Go on, Tay man, break yourself off a piece." So just as the Tay man's reaching up to break himself off a piece of this much coveted soda bread, doesn't the little husband come in and, "No, you'll ruin that soda bread. You'll wait and you'll have it in the morning like the rest of us." So this is it. The Tay man it's confirmed now, and without being crude, well, in being enforced to be crude here, but the Tay-man felt an unwelcome guest down between his legs, and knowing that he wasn't wearing anything, he had to concentrate and stare dead into the fire in order for the unwelcome guest to leave.
Is this brand appropriate? This story is this appropriate? It is.
It is appropriate. It is appropriate. It is. It's got a PG-12 rating. So the Tay-man, he knows now that he's going to be there for the night. Now, it being a very small cottage, it meant it only had the one bed. So it was going to be the three of them in the one bed. The Tay-man, the husband, and the wife. So the husband had to formulate a plan here. He's like, I'm not having the Tay-man in the bed beside my wife. So I'm gonna put the wife in against the wall. Now, it's one of these coffin beds, you know, it's just you get down into it.
Yeah.
So he puts the wife in against the wall, and then in climbs the Tay-man, and then with the Tay, wait, sorry. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the order. So he puts the wife in against the wall, and then
he gets in the middle.
climbs in himself.
Yeah.
He's in himself, yeah. And then the Tay-man climbs in.
Right.
And it's the three, and it's so tight now in the bed that if one of them has to turn, they all have to turn all at the same time. And it's kind of on the count of three. Hey, do, three. So anyway, the storm is still raging outside, and the Tay-man and the wife and the husband are all in the bed, and then the husband suffered from a dose of the frequency. Are you familiar with the frequency?
What's a dose of the frequency now?
The frequency is he had to get up every couple of hours to shed a couple of tears for Parnell. So,
here, how many more hours does this go on for?
not for long. We're nearly there now, right?
Right. So he had the frequency, right? A dose of it.
He's the frequency, and he's out. But he picks up the baby in the cot and puts it in between the Tay-man and the wife, just so that there's a barrier between the two of them.
Right.
So there's a barrier between the two of them, and then he comes back in, takes the baby out, climbs back in over the Tay-man, and then sure doesn't the frequency strike the second time, and he puts the baby in again, and he's gone again. So then the storm kicks up, and doesn't the bit of galvanized come off the roof of Martin's shed, and you can hear the horse going mental. So the husband, tending to his duties, jumps up, out, leaves, but he forgets to put the thing in between the wife and the Tay-man. So here's the Tay-man now, and he hears this voice in the dark, and it's the wife, and she says, "Now, Tay-man, now's your chance." So the Tay-man, he sits up and he reaches out into the dark, and he breaks himself off a lovely piece of that soda bread. So that's the end of that. Anyway, the Tay-man, it's confirmed.
Well, I have so many questions, and I don't know where to start. But I think you have raised more questions than you've answered with this taller than tall tale. Where did this baby come from?
Baby.
Immaculate conception halfway through the story.
Oh, I know. But sure. The baby is it's a handy. It's something handy and important to put in between the two of them. But what I'd say is now the Tay-man, that's not the end of it, right? Because the Tay-man,
I thought that was the end now.
well, the Tay-man disappeared, right? The
Right.
Tay man disappeared after this, but all of the land had been bought by the Land Commission because they were going to be filling up the valley. They're going to fill the valley up with water.
Right.
But the police at the time didn't have the time to investigate it. So everybody thought Martin the horse went missing and the Tay man went missing. Right? And left in the middle of the valley was this giant stack of Tay, right? Still there, but out of reverence of the Tay man and his position, not one person touched that lot of Tay because it would have been bad luck. So
Right.
it came down to it that everybody evacuated the valley and they never found the Tay man. But when they flooded that valley with the warehouse of Tay, right smack bang in the center, it meant that this new lake, the Blessington Poulafuga Reservoir, became one giant pot of Tay. And people came far and wide, and all you had to do was fill up whatever it was you brought, your boot, your pot, your kettle, and you wouldn't have to, and it put all the Tay men across the country out of business. And that's why he was the last of the Tay men.
True
There.
story.
And that's
True
the
story.
truth.
That's the
that's
truth.
the-
You wouldn't lie to us after that length of a story. There's no way that would be a lie.
No, not at all, not at all. But now you know.
Well, how about that? Whatever happened, Martin the horse?
God knows. Poor old Martin and the Tay man, were they disappeared. No one ever found out what happened to them.
Well, that's one hell of a story. I tell you what, I believe it. I'd have no reason to doubt you, and I look forward to next time I go visiting Blessington, bringing a bucket with me to fill up with the Tay when I go to the lake.
That's it. That's why the water is brown in the Poulafuga Reservoir. It's actually Tay.
I mean, look, this is a story that you could only get in a lock-in. You know, it's the kind of thing that late at the night, after 18 drinks, and somebody's got a story.
Yeah,
you delivered. Like you were the man right there. You delivered it for us.
this is it, and that's not the only one. That's not the only one I've got. I've got.
Well, listen to me now. Before you go on to the next one and plan your next 4-hour story for us, which is a great story. I have no doubt about it. Let me alert the audience that we have more coming to tonight. Not that we want to move away in any way from Hugh, but we'll be going in a few minutes to Stephanie, who's going to bring us back to some Dead Rabbit whiskey and walk us through the whiskey and help us understand how to use it for cocktails. And she's going to do a kitchen sink drinks cocktail demonstration for us. Then we'll be going to the lads for a bit of music. And then back for more drinks to Stephanie. But all right, so we'll squeeze in one more story.
It's a quick one. It's a quick one.
That's the last time too. All right, so go on, give us another one.
So Flann O'Brien, famous Irish writer, very famous Irish writer, and famous for his absurdity, wrote under a number of pseudonyms because he was a civil servant and he couldn't write under his own name at the time. So he was a mystery and enigma across Dublin. And no one could really get an interview with him. He wouldn't do an interview. But there was this young journalist who, out on the piss in Dublin at the time, he met a friend. He was always talking about Flann O'Brien and he met somebody who knew Flann O'Brien, who was known to frequent the early houses. And he said, look, leave it with me. I'll say it to Flann. You're a nice guy. I'll see if I can get you an interview. So anyway, he's waiting around, just knocking around Dublin a couple of weekends later, and he meets the same guy again. He goes, look, I had a word with Flann. You can go and have a word with him. Thing is, just don't. It's not a normal interview. Go buy the man a pint. See if if you get on well, great. Brilliant. More power to you, but don't start writing stuff down and all this lark. And one other thing, he wears this pair of velvet gloves, and under no circumstances are you to mention the gloves, because just don't mention the gloves. So your man goes down to the early house, goes down to the chancery, and the early houses are all down around by the market, because the market people would be finished early and they'd be gasping for a drink. And so Flan's there at the bar, gloves on, sure enough, and your man buys him a pint. They're getting on really well. They're having pints, and then they're on to the whiskies. And your man's getting confident. He's getting very confident about it. But he's also like, they're getting on really well. He's like, come here to me. What is the story with the gloves? You tell me what the story is with the gloves. And he can see, he can hear before he sees it. And Flan is holding the glass of whiskey, and you can hear the squeak of the velvet on the glass. And then he looks and he turns to him and he says, I promised me mother on her deathbed that I'd never touch another drink.
Listen, another true story. I love it.
Very true, not apocryphal at all. But, yeah, so that's Flan O'Brien.
I bet you have a repertoire that is as long as 6 arms of stories like that. And I bet we've only scratched the surface of the length and breadth of your storytelling, which I'd imagine you'd have a story that would get you through a lock-in until the light would creep under the door again the next morning.
That's the only reason they keep me around. This is the only reason they keep me around.
People are well entertained in our audience. The comments are great. People loving the stories. A few questions about your surroundings too. People are curious as to where you are. They're noticing there's what look like plaques or certificates on the fireplace. There's an interesting column for your glassware. This is a very random setup you've got going on here.
I know. It's I've had this weird string of events that have happened in the lockdown where I've ended up. This is an old family place, but it was a side of the family that I didn't really have much to do with. But in the lockdown, myself and my partner ended up, we were about to move to Kerry, but we just kind of wanted to stay relatively close to family and stuff. So just in this string of events, this house has to be rewired, and it's a massive undertaking, and it's on a kind of long finger. So I've kind of started that process by renovating the barn out the back and making it livable. So we're there, and I'm just kind of caretaker here at the moment while things are getting sorted. But it was done up in the 70s, and actually some of a branch of the Jameson family actually lived here at one point. The story goes that one of them, I think the story goes that he dipped out of the family, and but there's a very funny story that he was asleep in the front room here, and he had the front door open, and there was a policeman doing the rounds, and he popped his head in to see if everything was all right, and he apparently got a riding boot over the head and was knocked out cold or something like that. But that's one of the stories of this place. But it's an amazing spot, and it was built about 200 years ago. But it's seen better days.
You're a man that could be welcomed into Kerry. You're dressed like a man that could live on the mountains down in Kerry, maybe on Schley Head or the Dingle Peninsula. You wouldn't be out of place with the big gloves and the shillelagh, like.
Oh, this is it. Yeah. And I'm sure they'd love me doing all that, being from the Pale. But, yeah, no, I'm very fond of Clorglan down in Kerry, and there's a festival down there called the Puck Fair, where they get a goat, a he goat off the mountain, and put him up on a platform and basically sell stuff and drink under him for 3 days.
King Puck.
King Puck. This is it. And he's married to someone. He's married to one of the girls in the village as well. The Puck. So I'm interested in. I love all those stories and the stuff that we're still connected with today, and all those kind of things. So
well, we know that storytelling, of course, a huge part of Ireland and Irish history, and how we survived really was just before the written word, just handing it down from one to the next through sitting around a fire or sitting around a candle, as the case may be, and passing a story around. And I'd say there's 100 more stories we need to tap into next, and maybe bring back on for another episode.
And anytime, yeah. And big cheers to everybody across the water, and I hope you're all having a lovely time. I really enjoyed that tour of the distillery as well. So thanks a million for having me. Yeah,
well, Hugh, thank you for joining us, and thanks for your tales. We had no clue where they were going, but they ended up in a perfect, being tied up with a perfect bow. So Sláinte, we appreciate your storytelling.
If you ever see a man wearing gloves, you know why, when he's drinking, right?
So he swore he never touched the drink. Good man. All right, Hugh, we let you go. We let you go back to your crazy location.
Okay,
Cheers, Hugh. All right. I don't know how we're going to recover from that. We had no idea where that was going, but we survived it. All right. We're going to go in about 90 seconds to Stephanie's going to lead us through a tasting of the Dead Rabbit Irish whiskey and some cocktails. But let me take a moment to ask you how you're all doing. Are you still surviving and hanging in there and drinking whiskey? I think you are. Everyone delighted with the entertainment. Cheers, Hugh. Cheers, Hugh. Lots of cheers. Yes, everyone loving the storytelling and trying to predict or determine or guess what the statues and plaques were around Hugh. We swore we wouldn't give away his location. He's in a very unusual location, so we were true to our word. And aren't lock-ins full of those kind of things? You never know where things are going to go, and that's always the best way. All right, I've got my bottle of Dead Rabbit ready to go, which means we should bring in our next guest. Stephanie, how are you?
Hi, I'm really good. How are you guys?
Welcome.
Thank
How
you.
are we going to top that storytelling madness and lunacy?
I don't know, like already straight away, I'm here from my couch, like how can I even compete? That guy had a column for his glass. I don't know, I have no props. I'm sorry, guys. I just have some whiskey. And I'll try to match the storytelling, but I feel like if I get you drinking enough, that you'll be like, oh yeah, she's a pretty good storyteller.
That's the secret. I mean, we can't expect every guest to have had a Jameson family member sitting in their front room and being knocked out by a policeman. Like that doesn't happen in every house, surprisingly.
No. So I'll have to win you over by booze appeal alone.
So Stephanie, you are the global whiskey ambassador for the Dead Rabbit Irish whiskey and the whiskey ambassador for the Dublin Liberties Distillery. You are flying the flag for whiskey all around the world. How did you get into this line of work, and what interests you about whiskey?
So I have been a cocktail bartender in Dublin City for over 10 years. So I competed in a lot of competitions and I managed a couple of cocktail bars. And I've been very, very active within the cocktail community. And what was interesting was when I first started out as a bartender, everything that we used in a bar was imported. All of our mixers, everything that we used was imported. And in the past 5 years or so, I mean, that's why we're here today, is that Irish whiskey has made this incredible comeback. So about 5 years ago was when the first kind of, new family of Irish whiskey started to come onto the market. And we also had, Irish made mixers, if you look at the likes of poachers, etc. And so while I was a cocktail bartender, I was very focused on flavor. But when it came time for these new Irish products to come in, it was very exciting for me to kind of fly the flag for Ireland and be like, I can be a cocktail bartender and I can make you a drink where all the ingredients are from Ireland. And that was really exciting to me. And as I said, I was in Dublin City for 10 years. So, you know, it was kind of, Dublin is the capital. So that's where you tend to find everything that's new and exciting. And that was when, you know, the Irish whiskey wave had just started to build, and you could feel the energy and you could feel that there was this shift in attitude towards Irish whiskey. And it was just very exciting. I mean, I really, really like flavor. I feel like that's my focal point. And then, you know, with Irish whiskey, in comparison to other whiskey categories, there's just so much diversity and so much freedom, and there's so much flavor and so much variety within the flavor that you can find, that I find it really, really fascinating. So when this job came up, it was essentially like, do you like whiskey? It's like, check. Yes, I do like whiskey. Do you like cocktails? Check. I do. Do you like talking? Yes, check. Oh my God. Boom.
Everything.
There we have it. Dream job. Here I am. And I really have the best job in the world. I get to drink whiskey and cocktails and talk about whiskey and cocktails all day. So
amazing.
I'm pretty happy.
So we got the right person here tonight. So who knows her cocktails and her whiskey, and you also you're well into your Irish whiskey history, and we're going to tap into some of that maybe for our third whiskey tonight, and talk about some of the dark history of a very famous part of the kind of the golden triangle of whiskey production in Ireland and Dublin, the Liberties. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're going to kick off with the Dead Rabbit Irish whiskey, and then you're going to turn it into a few magically through alchemy into a few cocktails for us. Help our audience understand and learn a little bit about this particular whiskey.
Okay, so all you need to know is that it's delicious. I feel like that's my presentation done.
That's it.
That's it. It's just delicious. That's all you need to know. Okay, so I really, really love this whiskey. It's quite unique in that it was actually designed from the beginning to be a whiskey that was not only delicious on its own, but also delicious within a cocktail. And for someone like me who likes whiskey and cocktails, you've got an absolute winner of a whiskey. So I am pretty sure that almost anybody who lives within the world of Irish whiskey, or who lives in the US, or who knows anything about cocktails has probably heard about the Dead Rabbit Bar, which is located in New York City. And so this bar is founded and run by two guys from Belfast, which is in Northern Ireland. And prior to them opening the Dead Rabbit Bar, they actually ran a bar called the Merchant Bar. And at that stage, it won the best bar in the world. And so they decided that they were going to make the best bar in the world that was their bar. So they were working in the Merchant, but they got the opportunity to open their own bar. And they did that. They brought it, and they opened up the Dead Rabbit in 2013. In Manhattan, in an area known as the 5 Points. And they opened up this bar, which they essentially became the gold standard for cocktails globally. Like, not even US, like global. Like, you could go to any cocktail bartender anywhere in the world, and once you mention Dead Rabbit, they're going to know instantly who you're talking about. And what was fascinating about what, you know, Sean and Jack, and also Julian Vose, who's their beverage director, and that whole team, what they managed to do was they were actually crucial in the growth and development and the renaissance period that we're in right now of Irish whiskey. So they opened in 2013, and what they did was they brought Irish whiskey to the American palate, and they brought it in a very accessible way. And prior to this, Irish whiskey was considered to be, even in Ireland, you know, it was quite similar, but the majority of people perceived Irish whiskey to be an old person's drink. It would be the old lad in the corner, paddy cap, 2 fingers, don't even look at the direction of water. Whereas what Jack and Sean did was they brought this energy. They brought the Irish energy and the crack and the banter, and they didn't just bring it to the bar setting and the atmosphere, but they also brought that to the liquid itself. So they were showcasing Irish whiskey in this completely revolutionary way, where it was like, it's not just some dusty bottle in a corner. It's actually incredibly versatile. And it works phenomenally well within the world of cocktails. So, they really, really helped to build momentum in the wave that we're currently in right now of like the growth of Irish whiskey. So, props to them. They are incredible. But obviously, if you're going to build a bar around this idea of Irish whiskey, they were like, perhaps we should make an Irish whiskey. So to celebrate their 5th birthday, they decided that they were going to partner up with Darren McAleese. Now, Darren McAleese has been on your podcast, over 20 years experience within the Irish whiskey industry. I know he's a legend. You know he's a legend.
He's in our audience tonight. He just checked in a minute ago. He's here listening to us. So hi, Darren.
Daryl! Oh my God, I am such a big Daryl fan. But essentially, I would consider Daryl like he's a ledge bag. That's it. There's no qualms.
He's a what? He's a ledge bag. This is a new phrase.
Ledge bag. Yeah.
A ledge bag. Okay, he's a ledge bag.
But Daryl has a phenomenal palate and obviously, a wealth of experience. And
hi, Darren.
I work with Daryl and I still fangirl. This is how cool this guy is.
You're a ledge bag, Daryl. You're a ledge bag.
But he has this wealth of experience, phenomenal palate, and he's created some incredible whiskeys. So what you have is pioneers within 2 different worlds. So you've got Jack and Sean, who are pioneers within the cocktail world. You've got Daryl, who's a pioneer within the Irish whiskey world. And, it made sense for the 2 of them to come together. And when they came together, what they wanted to do is they just wanted to create a whiskey that was the best of both worlds. So, Jack and Sean had their input to ensure that it was a whiskey that would work very well within cocktails. And obviously Daryl had all of that knowledge and mastery to make the whiskey, but also to ensure that the whiskey was really delicious by itself. And so what we ended up with is a product that I always refer to as an Irish whiskey with an American accent. And I really like this. I would find this to be the Irish whiskey that's almost the bridge between the realm of Irish whiskey and the realm of bourbon. So it is a blended Irish whiskey. It's aged for a minimum of 5 years. And the most interesting part for me is probably the aging. But just before we get into the aging, it's also bottled at 44% ABV. So when you have a blend, you're trying to take elements of 2 different styles of whiskey. This is a blend of malt and grain. So grain, as we know, is typically very, very light. It's floral, it's accessible. And malt tends to be very, very rich and deep. Now, when you're taking the 2 of those and blending them together, you're trying to reach that sweet spot where the whiskey is very accessible so that lots of different people can drink it, but you're also trying to get that malt and that complexity in so that people who are, your kind of everyday whiskey drinkers still have something interesting and complex to break down. So that's really important, not only for the whiskey drinker, but it's also really important to ensure that there is some complexity when you're making your cocktails. And bottling it at 44% ABV. Legally, you have to bottle Irish whiskey at 40% ABV, but we bottled a little bit higher. And the higher ABV, you can put down to, this is what we consider the sweet spot for the Irish whiskey. So it's at 44% where it's that little bit stronger. It's strong enough to, shine through within a cocktail, but on the whiskey drinker side, it's not overpowering. So you've got something that's, really, really accessible straight off the bat. But the aging is where this really shines through. So you've got 5 years ex-bourbon. There's no sherry in there whatsoever. So, if you're thinking about an Irish whiskey with an American accent, bourbon is obviously the go-to, well, in my brain anyway, for American. So you've got all of those vanilla, the caramel, all of those delicious bourbon notes. But after the 5 years in the ex-bourbon barrel, which are typically around 200 liters, we actually have custom-made virgin American hogshead. So these ones are half the size. So you've gone from 200 liters to 90 liters. And what that does is that increases the whiskey to wood ratio. So what's happening now is that when we put this whiskey inside these much smaller barrels, it's going to interact a lot faster and a lot more rapidly with the wood. And because it's virgin American oak, This is the same aging process that you would use for bourbon. So it's a medium char, virgin American oak, and all of those kind of add that extra punchiness that you usually find within bourbon that kind of gets lost in the secondary aging for Irish whiskey. But we're trying to bring that spiciness, that punchiness, that really fresh wood, those pencil shavings, all of that comes through within the Dead Rabbit. So, I mean, I'm very excited about this.
I don't think you're at all excited. Your excitement is in no way shining through tonight. We're very disappointed with the low energy levels.
Let me just have a little nip here and see if I can get the energy levels. But yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal. And what I would say is that this is everybody's second whiskey of the night. So what I would just say is that it's a phenomenal whiskey. It's delicious. But it is 44%. It is a little bit stronger, and so I always like to have just a tiny little dash of water. It'll lower the ABV and it'll open up a lot more aroma, and it'll help it go on all around the palate a little bit happier as well. So I mean, delicious neat as well, but it is really interesting to try it because it is that slightly higher ABV with that dash of water.
Okay, brilliant. I don't normally add water to the whiskey, but I'm following your lead because you seem to know what you're talking about.
There's always normally if I'm doing like a straight up like Dead Rabbit tasting, there's like a whole scientific process. I get super nerdy about it, but one of the steps is like I always recommend if you're going to have a whiskey that's over 40%, so like 44 or above, it's always a really good idea to add just a tiny bit of water. It's not how I recommend that you drink it every day, but it's just really interesting because alcohol is essentially what's carrying that flavor, but the alcohol is an irritant. So it causes your mouth to tingle. It can block up your nose. You can actually overwhelm your olfactory glands if you sniff it too fast. So when you're adding the water, you're kind of diluting the aromas. You're diluting the alcohol burn. So you're still getting the flavor, but you're kind of finding more of that flavor within the alcohol.
What do you look for in flavor profiles on the nose or on the palate from virgin American oak? So you mentioned like pencil shavings. Like what is the distinctive? Is there a distinctive note we should be looking for?
So for me, it's pencil shavings. It's that fresh woody smell. There's also some burnt coffee almost. I say burnt coffee. I'm not really a massive coffee drinker, so for me, coffee always smells a little bit burnt. No, but it's that very dark coffee. There's also dark chocolate, and then the finish for me is black pepper. It's got that little, it's kind of like a mid palate. You've got that little bit of a linger. It's that really nice spice at the end.
Is this, is it the married spirit that is then the married whiskey that is then transferred to the virgin American oak, or is it's the married? Okay. So it's the grain and the malt together.
Yeah. A little happy family.
There's I definitely get that pencil shavings piece, and I get a kind of that malt biscuitiness as well. There's a crunch to it, isn't there? There is a crunchy finish.
Yeah,
like a brittle, crunchy finish to it.
There is, on the nose especially, there is a lot of the very, classic Irish whiskey notes. So there is, the caramel, there's a little bit honeycomb sometimes. Like you've got all of those vanilla, sweet, lovely notes, but it's just when you go a little bit under that. There's also sometimes, this is very strange, but on some tastings I have gotten like freshly melted butter. But I can't tell if that's just because I'm really Irish and I really like butter, but not in the texture, but just there's just a hint of creaminess at the back of the palate sometimes. But I don't know if that's just when I'm hungry or not. Like, I don't know.
Interesting. Talk to me about the use of whiskey in cocktails. And so I encounter varying perspectives and opinions on what should and shouldn't be mixed in cocktails. And I'm a big believer that the better the ingredients, the better the cocktail. And I would have no hesitation if budget allowed on a rare day to put a redbreast 21-year-old into a cocktail if it made a better cocktail. I'm going to guess you're of the same ilk. You're thinking of the same approach.
100%. So as I said before, one of the things that really fascinates me about Irish whiskey is the versatility. So if you look at Irish whiskey as a category in comparison to, say, bourbon, you have a lot more freedom when it comes to your grain. You have a lot more freedom when it comes to the distillation, the type, the amount of distillation, to your aging. And what that results in is it results in a very wide spectrum of flavor. And so within those spectrums of flavor, it's when you kind of, it's almost like pairing wine with food. There are some whiskeys that potentially wouldn't taste that good in like a whiskey sour, because it would just taste better on its own than in a whiskey sour. And yet there are some whiskeys that would taste really, really good in a whiskey sour. And I do think that for Irish whiskey, if you look at the likes of bourbon, Scotch less so. There are Scotch cocktails, but I think that in the modern revival of the cocktail realm, there haven't been as many Scotch classics as there are bourbon and rye classics. And I think that when it comes to Irish whiskey, especially Dead Rabbit specifically, because for me it is that flavor link between Irish whiskey and bourbon, it transitions very easily into the realm of bourbon cocktails. But the other thing then is that, if you have the right flavor profile, so if you have Irish whiskey that's finished in a rum cask, for example, it's going to have those tropical flavors. So therefore you can pair it with tropical flavors within your cocktails. So I really think that, I'm 100% for really good base spirits make really delicious cocktails. Like if you're making, if you want to make a really good cocktail, all of your ingredients are important. If you're having a whiskey and tonic or something, the tonic is important, because it's as important as the whiskey as you're adding in. Because if you have a really delicious whiskey and then you're adding in like a Tesco brand tonic, you are not giving that whiskey justice. So I have no issues with adding a Redbreast 21 and making a Boulevardier, for example. But if I was to make a Redbreast a whiskey sour with fake lemon juice, that would upset me a little, I think, because
we'd all be very upset with that.
It's just like, but that doesn't mean if that's what you want to do, I have no judgment. But I do think that, if you're going to invest in having this beautiful base for a base of your cocktails, then you should invest in making sure that everything is a really good quality.
So it sounds like your approach though it seems like there's two approaches to cocktail making. One is, I know that I'm going to need an Irish whiskey for a certain ingredient or a certain recipe. Therefore, I'll grab an Irish whiskey, whatever it may be, and put it in there. That's one approach. The other is, I have an Irish whiskey. I need to know enough about it to know what I'll build on top of it, even though it may be the last thing to go into the shaker or the glass, but I know what I'm going to use to complement it. It sounds like you're in that camp, that let's start by understanding the whiskey, then build around it.
Yeah. Because it's just, even if you are not like, I've worked in cocktails for 10 years. I would hope that I'm somewhat decent at making drinks at this stage. But, even if you're not a cocktail person, it's, I always find that whenever you do tastings with people, everyone has their own palate, obviously. So, someone could be drinking Dead Rabbit right now and they could be like, there's no black pepper, there is no burnt orange, there is no chocolate, there's no this. They're like, I just taste bananas and pineapples. And I'm like, that's okay. If you just taste bananas and pineapples and you have a cocktail and you're like, okay, I heard about this cocktail and it has some pineapple juice in it and some lime juice, and normally there's rum in it, potentially, if you're tasting bananas and pineapples, you should try it with the Irish whiskey. You don't have to have this wealth of knowledge or experience about making cocktails. It's more so, I would encourage everybody to go by their own personal tasting notes. So if you're tasting a whiskey and you're like, oh my God, this has wonderful cherry notes, or this has wonderful apricot notes, then you can look for things that would traditionally pair with apricot and be like, maybe I'll sub some Irish whiskey into this cocktail.
It's fascinating. I'm obsessed with listening to those who know more about everything than me, and that's everybody really. But I'm obsessed with learning about every aspect of whiskey production and notes and flavors, because I'm very young and new on my journey of Irish whiskey compared to so many others. But even tonight, listening to Katrina as we were tasting the Dubliner bourbon cask, and she just used, just threw out the note apple juice. And as soon as she said apple juice, I thought, it is apple juice. That is exactly what I'm getting. And we don't always have the nose or the palate that's ready or that's experienced enough to detect it. And we're waiting for someone to say, that's pine, that's mahogany, that's cherry. That is what I'm getting. And then the mind starts to pick up on it. And I'd probably never again taste that without saying, I get the apple juice. So I think we can all I love hearing people's notes to see, can I find the same thing? Yeah.
Well, there's like other things that you can do. So, will I get super nerdy? Because like I can ramble for days about this if you just leave me unattended. But
sure, I've nowhere to be.
I'll get a tiny bit nerdy about how we process flavor.
Go on.
So we process, it's estimated up to 85% of all flavor is not actually perceived through your mouth. It's perceived through the olfactory gland, which is located at the back of your nose at the roof of your mouth. And the olfactory gland, it's very, very close to where we store memory. So what happens is that when we are sniffing things, that's the first processing of flavor. And if you were to completely block your nose, you wouldn't be able to differentiate flavors. You can differentiate textures, and you can differentiate, this is kind of salty, this is kind of sweet. But the actual, if you were to say like, oh, this is pineapple or this is lemon, it's not going to work. So with this knowledge, basically what happens is that the aroma goes up, it hits your olfactory gland. Your gland is very close to your memory. And then it does this thing where it's like, okay, when was the last time I smelt or tasted this? So it goes through this index. And if it's something like, I would say I have a lot of apples. I don't know if that's just an Irish thing, like Irish kids are just raised with apples. So you have a lot of apples. I know what apples smell and taste like because I have them all the time. But like, my dad is Chinese Malay. So I also had a lot of pineapple when I was growing up. So like, these are like things that I would be like really, really comfortable with. Yeah. But for someone who didn't grow up with pineapple, it could be quite difficult for them to remember what fresh pineapple smells or tastes like. Yeah. And so because your brain's going through that index, essentially, if the memory's too old, it can't access it. So what you have to do is you have to keep reminding your brain, giving it like new files, essentially. So when I do tasting, so if I was to do a group tasting now with Dead Rabbit and, it was non-COVID and we're all in the same room, I'd have different pots of flavor in front of you so that you can smell that flavor and you're essentially building that file. So that when it comes to smelling the whiskey, then your brain, it's super easy for your brain to be like, oh, that's the file for orange,
Amazing. And that's why you hear people saying like, I get it on the palate, wood shavings or copper. It's not like we're licking a copper pot still or we're licking the carpenter's table, but rather we've smelt that, and that is so connected. Our taste and our smell are so connected to our olfactory glands. Yeah.
So, if you want to improve your palate, what I do is if I really want to deep dive on a whiskey, I'll just grab whatever's in my kitchen. You grab the pepper, you grab, whatever fruit you have lying around, whatever vegetables you have lying around, if you have any herbs. And what you can do is you can have little sniffs. And then, like take a little break and then go over to your whiskey and then have little sniffs again. The only thing is that occasionally, if you sniff too many things, you can actually overload the olfactory gland. What will happen is that it'll be like, oh, there's too many files. And then it'll just kind of like die. So you'll be like sniffing things and you'll be like, oh, what is going on? So I actually had a competition. And it was a very, very big, it's like the biggest bartending competition globally. And in that competition, we had to blind taste 3 spirits. So I'm backstage and we have like, I think they would select 3 spirits out of 18 spirits. So we've got these 18 little pots and we're like addicts in the back. So all of us are like sipping all these pots. We're testing each other. We're like, what is this? What is this? What is this? How is this aged? And by the time it came for me to go out on stage, my olfactory gland had just shut off.
Really?
I had spent about 45 minutes to an hour solidly just sniffing whiskey, which sounds really weird when I say that as a sentence. It was for a competition. It's totally fine. But yeah, so I was just, I completely overwhelmed my olfactory gland. And by the time I went out on stage, it had just kind of gone into, it had frozen. I couldn't process any new flavors. And I had to do that whole competition judging the color of the glass.
Is that right?
So yeah, just if you do want to do this to improve your palate, then just be aware of your olfactory kind of getting a bit tired. So it's good to do it in small little bursts,
Yeah. No, that's great advice, and the best advice I think I ever got when I first started trying to understand the difference between one whiskey and another was just to start eating and drinking as many things as I could over a period of time, and just reminding my brain and my olfactory glands clearly what those things were, and storing that information. And that's a very difficult thing for me, because I historically used to eat like a child. Even as an adult, I'd eat like a child, and my palate was very limited, and so I had to expand the palate in order to understand the different whiskies, which is a slow process. We're going to move on to cocktails in a second. I wonder if Conor and Chris in the background there, who are going to come on and play us a tune, turn on your camera and your microphone, lads, and I'll know that you're ready to give us a tune. And when I see you come on, or when I see your cameras there, I'll bring you on for an old tune or two for us. And while we wait on that, sure, maybe we'll... why don't you? Oh, here they are. They're ready for us. They were hiding there in the background behind their turned off camera. Why don't we go for a tune, Stephanie, before we start into the cocktails?
Perfect.
How about that? Okay, good deal. Let me bring on the boys here, and I'll bring you back in 1 second. Hello. Gentlemen, how are you getting on? Are you well?
Yes, we're very, very good. We've been enjoying it so far.
Yep.
Fair play to you for staying up so late in Ireland. I mean, lock-ins are typically this time of night, but geez, this is a different kind of a setup.
Yeah. It's the whiskey's helping. We've a bottle of Dubliner here, so we're
definitely
helping things. All right.
Right on brand, GR. Yeah. Fair play to you. Tell us a little bit. Give us a quick overview of your own music and what you do, and help our audience understand your own kind of approach to music.
Yeah, no problem. Well, Chris and I have been playing together for a long time. We played in a band together called Silences for
lots of years.
Lots and lots of years. And then we've ended up just kind of doing our own thing. And Chris plays with me live. We've been performing with Villagers, and we're performing with John Grant and Margaret Glaspie this year. Played in Vicar Street, so we've been releasing music and doing bits under my name. But Chris himself is a writer as well, so it's kind of good to be able to chill out and play covers and do something a bit fun. So this is nice. We're very excited about doing this.
We're excited to have you. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. I've kind of we talked before we came on, and I said I'd take your lead on what music. Who am I to decide what a musician should play? After all, you're the experts, not me. So you came up with some suggestions yourselves. Far be it for me to decide. What do you kick us off with tonight, lads?
We think we're going to start off slow. We think we're going to progressively get a bit lighter towards the end of the night, just to suit after a cocktail, we might be a bit more buoyant. So this song, we wanted to play something. Dublin seems to be quite a prevailing theme tonight, along with the whiskey. So we thought we would play a song first by a poet called Patrick Kavanagh. He wrote a poem called Raglan Road, and it's about a lot. And there's a lot of famous Dublin landmarks named in the poem, and it was adapted to a song by Luke Kelly of the Dubliners. So it's as Dublin as you could really be.
That's all we need. Beautiful tune. Looking forward to it. Take it away, lads.
On Raglan Road of an autumn day, I saw her first and knew that dark hair would weave a snare that I might one day rue. I saw the danger and I passed along the enchanted way, and I said, let grief be a fallen leaf at the dawning of the day. On Grafton Street, November, we
tread lightly along the ledge of a deep ravine where can be seen the wealth of a passion's pledge. And the Queen of Hearts still making tarts, and I not making hay. And I love too much, and by such is happiness thrown away. On a quiet street where all ghosts meet, I see her walking there, away from me so hurriedly. My reasons must allow that I have loved not as I should, a creature made of clay. When the angel weeps, her wings she'll lose at the dawning of the day.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Moved. I moved. That was lovely. A lovely kind of your own twist on it. You slowed it down in a lovely way.
Yeah, we'd like to say that we've adapted it from the original because we wanted to put our own spin on it, but it's more so we can't play the original. Luke Kelly was one and only, so.
Fair play. No, that's beautiful. It's a lovely poem. It's a beautiful tune. It's it's an amazing song that unites all generations of Dubliners. Whether you're 20 or you're 80, everyone says that's a good Dublin song.
Yeah, it's the essential Dublin song, I feel.
It is. It really is. Would you give us one more before we go back to Steph? You're on a roll there, and I'm kind of I'm in the mood to listen to a bit more of the beautiful dulcet tones. Like I'd love to see what you might suggest next.
Absolutely. Well, Chris is going to take the lead in this one. Maybe we've done Dublin, so I know you've got a lot of American viewers tonight, so we'll play one from an American band, little known independent band called Fleetwood Mac.
Never heard of them.
No, they're not bad.
Great things ahead, I hear.
Yeah. And this is called Dreams.
Oh, beautiful.
So here we are again, say you want your freedom. Well, who am I to cut you down? It's only right that you should play the way you're feeling. Listen carefully to the sound of the loneliness, like a heartbeat drives your mind. In the stillness of remembering what you hide, in what you lost, in what you hide, in what you lost. Ooh, thunder only happens when it's raining. Players only love you when they're playing. Ooh, women, they will come and they will go. Well, treat you like a shell. Dreams of loneliness like a heartbeat drives your mind. In the stillness of remembering what you hide and what you lost and what you hide and what you lost. Ooh, thunder only happens when it's raining. Players only love you when they're playing. When they will come and they will go. When the rain washes you clean, you'll know. Ooh, thunder only happens when it's raining. Players only love you when they're playing. When they will come and they will go. When the rain washes you clean, you'll know. You know. You know. You know. You know.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. 2 words, you'll know. Well, we all know. It's great music. And the audience knows. They're loving it. That's beautiful. That's a classic. And a lot of, we got some comments. People listen to that when they're listening to Fleetwood Mac when they're driving the back roads in Ireland. Steve is playing along on his guitar, I think. Fantastic. Lots of people singing themselves and delighting in the fact that they're on mute and you're not, which is probably a smart thing. That was fantastic. Tyler loves anything from Fleetwood Mac, and Johnny says Stevie Nicks is easier on the eyes than you lads. Well, there you go.
Fair enough.
Yeah, agreed.
That's fair enough. Yeah, that's to be expected. We're going to go back to Steph for a cocktail, but if you wouldn't mind sticking around for another song or two, we'll come back to you after the first cocktail, and maybe you'll get another tune ready for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no problem.
Fair play. Thanks, gents. We'll be back to you shortly.
See you in a bit.
Now,
Hello.
how about that? What
Oh
a
my
lineup
God.
tonight! It's unreal. This is a session. Like we're in a session
I'm
now.
perfectly happy to like go back and let the lads play again. Like I was very much enjoying that.
Well, hold on a second now. Did I just spot a cat? Was there a cat there on your chair?
Yeah, the cat was drawn by the lovely lyrics, and there he is again. I don't know if
Hey, the distillery cat.
yeah. So he hasn't come anywhere near the computer until there was some music, and then he's up.
What's his name?
His name is York. He's named after
York.
the polar bear from Northern Lights because I'm a bit of a
I love cats. Great to see a cat. First cat on the lock-in.
Yay!
All right. So we're gonna. Why don't we make a cocktail? So
Yeah.
Stephanie, maybe you could tell us which one you've got 2 lined up for us tonight. Which one would you like to start with?
So we'll start off with the dive ball.
All right.
So the dive ball is what we would consider the signature serve for Dead Rabbit. And I know you're probably looking at this and you're like, is that really Irish whiskey and tonic water? And as someone who is really not the biggest fan of tonic water, I surprised myself. Honestly, it is actually really, really delicious. So like, I'm not really a big gin and tonic fan. I am much more a whiskey person, but Irish whiskey and tonic is phenomenal. So I'll just give you I'll kind of make the drink and then I'll go through a couple of little tips for like making drinks at home because I am clearly making it from my couch. If I can make it from my couch, then anyone can make drinks from home. So one of the things I would say is that what's most important when you're making any kinds of cocktail is making sure that you're using the correct measurements. Now, this drink doesn't have any sour or any sweetness added, so there's no lemon juice or lime juice or sugar or anything like that. But when you do have cocktails and you are using those, it is really important that you're measuring the correct amount, because you need to make sure that the cocktail is going to be balanced. And so I've got this fancy schmancy bartender contraption here, which is jigger, and you can get these in various different sizes. Some of them have little measurements inside, but if you're at home and you're like, I'm not really sure what to do, you can use measuring spoons, measuring cups. I've seen people use egg cups. So, you know, I would say, like, as you know, I know I'm not going to judge anyone for free pouring from a bottle in their house, but I will say that your cocktails will definitely taste a lot better if you start measuring that stuff beforehand. So dive ball, what are you going to need? You are going to need you're going to need a long glass. You're going to need some ice. You're going to need some Peychaud bitters. You're going to need some tonic water, and you are going to need a little slice of orange. So the first thing that I am going to do is I am going to get my dead rabbit, and I'm going to pour 35 mils into my glass. So 35 mils is the standard measure for Ireland. I know in the US that you guys use ounces. So this is like a very happy ounce, like a very generous ounce, you know? It's that ounce and a bit. It's that when you pour an ounce and you just tip the bottle a little bit more.
Bit for the cat.
Yes, exactly. All right, so now we've got the 35 mils in. We're going to add 2 dashes of our Peychaud bitters. And so when you have bitters, these are really, really interesting. And you know, there's kind of 2 main types that we use within the bartending world, which is Angostura and Peychauds. For this cocktail, we are using Peychaud bitters. But what I would say is that if you're thinking about making any kind of cocktails, these are 2 bitters I would highly recommend. And essentially, they are very, very intense liquids that are usually they're alcohol based, and they usually take a lot of flavor from different herbs and spices. Their recipes are always secret. But what's great about these is that you only need very, very small amounts, and it will change the flavor of your cocktails. So for this one, we're using 2 dashes. So when you're doing dashes, you'll see that there is a little hole in the top. And so essentially, you're just going to turn the bottle completely upside down and go 1, 2. And that's it, 2 dashes. So 2 dashes into your glass over your dead rabbit. And then we're going to take a tiny little bit of sea salt. So I've lost my sea salt grinder, so I have some pre-ground sea salt. And you're going to take the tiniest little pinch and just whoop in on top of that whiskey and Peychaud. And then we are going to give that a little bit of a stir, just to make sure that that salt is dissolved in there. And then we're going to fill the glass with ice. So whenever you're making cocktails at home, I would always recommend that you buy way more ice than you think you're going to need. Because there's this kind of weird theory that people think, oh, I'm so sorry for the clanking, but people seem to get very upset in a bar sometimes if you fill the glass full of ice, because they think that they're getting less product. But actually, what happens is if you fill a glass all the way to the top with ice, and the ice kind of supports itself, it means that there is less movement of the ice. So if there's less movement, there's less friction. If there's less friction, it means that the ice will maintain its temperature a lot longer and it won't melt as fast. So what happens is if you only put in 2 ice cubes, those 2 ice cubes, they're floating around. They melt very quickly. And what they do is they will bring down the temperature of your cocktail, but they'll also make it very watery. So, strangely enough, you need to add way more ice to make your cocktail less watery. So full glass of ice. And then we're just going to top it up with our tonic water. And then we're going to give that a very gentle stir. So because the tonic water is carbonated, you don't want to stir too aggressively because you'll lose all of those effervescent bubbles. So a nice little stir, because you don't want to leave all of that delicious whiskey at the bottom, because then you're just drinking tonic water and you get a shot of whiskey at the end. Which, I mean, you know, different strokes for different folks. But it's always much nicer if you can get a nice uniform color. And then we're going to add a little bit of orange. Now, you can just add this as a little garnish and throw it in and be like, oh, this is so pretty and delicious. But like, I'm drinking at home on my couch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give like a little tiny squeeze of orange So it's not the prettiest, and then just whack it in there, and then sláinte.
Sláinte. That's easy.
So this is delicious, as I said already, but it is really one of those drinks where I would recommend it for, like, if you're going to have a barbecue and you're like, oh, I'd really love a whiskey, but like it's 3 o'clock in the day and my family are coming over. So potentially I should have, like one of those drinks that kind of like helps you to stay at the same pace as everyone else. This is one of those drinks. This is like super refreshing. It's really lovely. And yeah, it's just it's really nice with the freshness of the orange, and also you're getting that little bit of salt. What it's going to do is it's actually going to highlight some of the more savory elements of the whiskey. So you're getting a lot more of that black spice through, or black pepper spice through it as well. And it really helps to tone down a little bit of the bitterness of the quinine that's in the tonic water. So really, it's a really, really light. I don't know. I don't want to say the word sessionable, but I'm Irish, so I feel like that's the word that I'm going to use today. But it's
you refer to these cocktails as your kitchen sink drinks. Is that because there's a bit of everything in them, or it's the ingredients are easily available?
Yeah, it's essentially like I was in my kitchen and I had some stuff and I was like, oh, to make a delicious drink. So yeah, it's kind of like throw everything at it, but also this is what you would typically find in your kitchen. The only thing that maybe not everybody would have is the Peychaud bitters. But I will say, grab a bottle because they're used in so many classic cocktails and they last forever. You saw how little I used in that. You buy one bottle, it has I don't even know what the shelf life is. It'll last you forever. But other than that, everything else is in your house. Everyone has a bottle of tonic. I have tonic. I don't even drink gin and tonics, and I had tonic sitting in my house. You've got oranges. Everyone has sea salt. If you don't, you need to get on that sea salt. But yeah, stuff you find in your kitchen.
That's so easy to do. I've got all those ingredients myself. Can you tell our audience the difference between Peychaud bitters and Angostura bitters? They're both derived from fortified wines, but are there specific different herbs, spices, elements in one versus the other?
Yeah, so essentially what you've got is you've got Angostura bitters is it was made in kind of more Northern America. And it's called Angostura because the main flavoring agent is Angostura bark. And so it's essentially, as I said already, secret recipes, but it has a lot of different botanicals that you actually find in gin. So you've got like orris root, angelica root, etc., etc. And it's essentially made to be super, super bitter, but with a lot of flavor. And I don't know if you can see it, but let me see if I can put it on my hand. They're very, very different in aroma and in flavor and in color. So I don't know if you can kind of see that there. Oh my God, I don't know my camera is, but that's more of a kind of orangey brown color. And this is very robust. As I said, it is quite bitter, but it's still delicious. And it is probably the most utilized bitters that exist within the cocktail world. Whereas Peychaud was developed in New Orleans. So you're going down a little bit south. And, it's a little bit warmer in New Orleans. And so this is a lot more refreshing. So this is where you're going to have a lot more aniseed notes, minty notes, a little bit more of those lighter citrus notes. So there's still bitterness in this, but this would be more along the lines of a bitterness similar to like Campari, where there's a lot of citrusy bitterness. And you can see, even just from what's left in the bottle, it is a very bright pink color. So they're very, very different. But they're both phenomenal, and they both work in the same way in that you add a couple of dashes and it'll really transform what you're drinking. So, the Peychaud works really, really well in the dive ball because Angostura, it is kind of richer, it's darker, it's heavier. And so we'll be using that in the next cocktail, which the most famous cocktail that everybody probably knows is the Old Fashioned. And so we're using Angostura bitters in there because it's very, it's whiskey forward. Whereas this drink is a lot lighter. You've got the tonic to kind of lengthen it. You've got a little bit of fresh orange in there, that tiny bit of sea salt. So the Peychaud works a lot better with this drink because it doesn't overpower the whiskey notes. It's just kind of in the background. It's adding a little bit of anise, that tiny bit of menthol, and there's a lot more of those lighter citrus notes.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we put up the ingredients here? If anybody would like to follow along, what we're going to do is we'll give you a moment to gather these ingredients. We'll go back to the lads for a tune. But if you have maple syrup, look, it's the kitchen sink drink. Who doesn't have maple syrup? And I'm sure every one of our cocktail aficionados here have some Angostura bitters. This is a super easy one. Grab yourself some Dead Rabbit or some whiskey that is not Dead Rabbit, whatever you have closest to the Dubliner and the Dublin Liberties Distillery ranges. Bring them back to the table, and then we'll make a maple old fashioned together after the lads give us another tune. How does that sound, Steph?
Amazing. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right, gentlemen, we are back to our musical maestros of the evening. What's next for us? Take us on a musical journey.
Well, I think we're going to play a couple more, if that's okay with you. Yeah,
brilliant. Love it.
So this one is, everyone loves to hear this when they're having their whiskey. This is an original, but it would be remiss of me not to play an original, because at the minute I'm working with Dead Rabbit and hosting a podcast called Liqueurs. And Liqueurs, we basically during lockdown, we've been interviewing musicians remotely and just kind of talking about original work. And there's a plethora of talent in Ireland, and people writing original songs. So I thought I'd take lead tonight and perform one of mine. And this song is called Bikini Crops.
Beautiful. Take it away.
Girls in bikini crops smile from the countertops, but I don't look, no, I'm just grinning, 'cause for once in my life, baby, I've been winning. Got a beautiful bird that sings to me, got plenty of banking, cash machine, no interest, one night stand. So from here on out, yeah, I'm good living. Drugs, drinking, cigarettes were part of the time I spent. You listen with pure tolerance, but I don't call them over now. I got a friend. I don't see myself running from you. That's like running to hell. I can't see a cloud. I'm sticking with you. It's a lie, you know it's true. I belong to you know it's real, the way I feel about you. And charm for knowing all the folly you've taken on. Melancholy red lights, you're giving me the grace of flying kite. Beautiful bird, you came to me when I didn't have a note. Joy to sing, how bad were those early days. I'm so glad you didn't fly away. I don't see myself running from you. That's like running to hell. I can't see a cloud. I'm sticking with you. It's a lie, you know it's true. I belong to you know it's real. The way I feel about you. And I don't see myself running from you. That's like running to hell. And I can't see a cloud. I'm sticking with you. It's a lie, you know it's true. I belong to you. You know it's real. The way I feel, you know it's true. I belong to you. You know it's real. The way I feel about you.
Yes. Oh, that's stunning. Amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
Where can we hear that song? Is that available anywhere on Spotify or anywhere else?
Yeah, you can hear it all streaming services. It's called Bikini Crops. And yeah, obviously my name is up on screen, Conchúr White.
So,
So,
that one.
yeah.
Bikini
So
Crops.
Hopefully
I love it.
Chris and I will be out this year performing. Who knows?
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully the world opens up. Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it's not the same just playing into a camera as it is getting good feedback from an audience live.
Well, this is as good as it can be.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. This is,
I know. Great feedback from the audience. Look at all the claps, cheers coming in. People loving the tunes. Absolutely loving the talent. Thanks a million for that. You mentioned wanting to play a couple of tunes. Have you a last tune to? I know we've got you for a window this evening that you might be able to send us out on a high with.
Absolutely. Well, because we played such a well-known song there before, we just thought we would balance it out and play a lesser-known song by Annie Lennox and the Eurythmics here. So this is again a little independent number called Sweet Dreams. Dreaming tends to be is a bit of a theme tonight.
Lots of dreaming, yeah.
Yeah. So thanks a million for having us.
Thanks for joining us, gents. Yeah, brilliant. Really loved having you. Thanks so much.
No problem.
Sweet dreams are made of this. Who am I to disagree? Travel the world in the 7 seas. Everybody's looking for something. Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? Travel the world in the 7 seas. Everybody's looking for something. Some of them want to use you. Some of them want to be used by you. Some of them want to abuse you. Some of them want to be the you. Sweet dreams are made of this. Who am I to disagree? Travel the world in the 7 seas. Everybody's looking for something. Some of them want to use you. Some of them want to get used by you. Some of them want to abuse you. Some of them want to be good. Hold your head up. Keep your head up. 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 Sweet dreams are made of this. Who am I to disagree? Travel the world in the 7 seas. Everybody's looking for something. Some of them want to use you. Some of them want to get used by you. Some of them want to abuse you. Some of them want to be with you. Hey.
You did it. You did it. You stayed up late. You brought the music. You didn't let us down. You knocked our socks off. I love it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm directing people to streaming services like Spotify, etc., to find you guys. Conchúr White, Chris Harbinson. You can find Conchúr on Spotify. Maybe Chris, you there as well, perhaps.
Yeah, amongst him.
Amongst Connor.
Yeah, Chris plays in a lot of my stuff.
Yeah.
Lovely, brilliant. Folks, go check them out. Give them support when the world opens up again. Hopefully, we can see you in person. And then, when's your podcast due out? Is it out already?
Yes, so it's called Liquid Chords, by Dead Rabbit, and it's out every Tuesdays on Spotify. So Liquid Chords. Liquid
Chords on Spotify podcast. I'll put links to this in our Facebook group as well, Irish Whiskey Fans of America, so folks can find you. Thanks a million for joining us tonight. You've made the night for us with some great tunes, so really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having us anytime.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Thanks a million, lads. Sláinte. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Oh, it's now just the three of us. Steph, the cat, and me. That's it.
He's gone. He can sense the excitement I have. Okay, so I know that this is supposed to be the maple old-fashioned, but the reason that I called it the maple old-fashioned is because I figured everyone has maple syrup in their cupboards. But
yes,
you couldn't easily do this with any kind of sugary substance that you have in your home. So if you had agave, you could use it with agave. That would bring a really interesting kind of almost earthy flavor to the cocktail as well. Or, you know, if you have some sugar, it's as easy as to boil a kettle and mix equal parts sugar and water and just stir until it dissolves. So having a sugar in your house, I'm sure everyone has some form of sugar in your house. So I just said maple because, you know, maple's delicious. It's good for pancakes, but it's also really good for old fashions. So with old fashions, I mean, you can be fancy and you can be schmancy, and you can have a separate container that you're stirring it in, and then you can strain off all that excess liquid, or you can just build it straight in the glass. So because I'm making this from my cage, I'm going to build it straight in my glass. So I have a rocks glass, or just any kind of, I guess any glass really. You're the one that's drinking it. It's totally fine. We're all in lockdown. It doesn't matter anymore. But yeah, I mean rocks glasses because they look fancy and they feel good. They're really hefty. They got that good weight. So for this, we are going to be using 60 mils. 60 mils is like 2 ounces. So we're going to be using 60 mils or 2 ounces of our beautiful dead rabbit. Now, as I said, I do consider this to be kind of like an Irish whiskey with an American accent. So for me, with that virgin American oak aging, it is phenomenal in an old fashioned. You know, it's just, it has that little bit of punch, that little bit of spice, and it works really, really well in a spirit forward drink. So I've got my fancy bar measure, but feel free to use egg cups or measuring spoons, whatever you have handy. And I'm going to be adding 60 mils or 2 ounces straight into my glass because we're not getting too fancy today. And then for the maple syrup, I put down 10 mils. Now, I understand that, you know, different people have different sensitivities to sweetness. So 10 mils is really a rough guide. If you're not the kind of person that likes things that are too sweet, you can add 5 mils and then you can kind of increase it. So for anyone in America, I can't remember what 5 mils is, but it's like a teaspoon.
Not enough.
So a teaspoon of whatever your sweetness is, maple, agave, whatever you have around your kitchen. And then if that's not sweet enough, then you can add a little sneaky extra teaspoon at the end. I, however, love maple syrup, so I'll be adding 10 mils of maple syrup to my glass, lash it in there, and then we have our Angostura bitters. Now, as I explained earlier, they should have a little hole in the top, which makes it very, very easy for you to dash it out. So we're going to be adding 3 dashes. So 1, 2, 3. And you know, even if you have your Angostura bitters there, there's no harm for you to put a little drop on the back of your hand, have a little smell. You can have a little bit of a taste as well, just so you can see what the Angostura really brings to the cocktail. It does really heighten the spicy, that black pepper spice that you get on the finish of the dead rabbit. This really highlights it. It also plays pretty well against the savoriness, and also it also really highlights the sweetness as well. Okay, so we have all of our ingredients in the glass. Now, again, I'm going to say, get your ice, fill your glass up to the top. So whack your ice in. And, you know, same thing as I said for the last cocktail. If you add less ice, then you're just going to end up with a kind of an over-watered old-fashioned. Now, because we're making this at home, what I would say is that when you're stirring it, you can take a teaspoon, you can take a latte spoon. If you want to use a knife, I mean, it could be kind of dangerous, but you know, it's whatever you have around your house.
Twig, a branch, whatever you have.
Yeah, I mean, go to the garden. I'm sure it's totally fine. Yeah, give it a little stir. And what we want to do is we just want to mix all of those ingredients together. Now, if you were in a bar, you'd probably want to stir this for between 45 seconds to like a minute potentially, depending on the temperature of the bar, etc., etc. But because we're at home, I actually like to under dilute my cocktail because you're making it in the glass. It's going to be sitting in the ice, and as you're drinking it, it'll dilute as you're drinking because you'll keep moving the glass. The ice will have friction, and the ice will slowly start to melt. So
if you were a cocktail impresario Gaz Regan, you would have stirred this with your finger.
Oh my God! Yes, I know. I mean, like, there are some tastings where I highly recommend it, but I feel like in the middle of a global pandemic, telling people to stir cocktails with their fingers is potentially not going to be perceived
You
well.
can buy his finger, though. You can buy the actual stir that is his finger.
It's so bizarre. So I was at Tales of the Cocktails in New Orleans in 2016 or 15. I was with my friend and he bought one of those finger stirrers, and we actually ran into Gaz Regan at this event, and he kind of went over and he was like, "Hey Gaz," like he had a cocktail, he's like, "I bought your finger," and Gaz just like without breaking eye contact just sticks his finger in his cocktail. He didn't really know what to do because he's got like the fake finger and this glass, and Gaz is just like eyeballing him with a finger in his glass.
He's well used to it, I'd say he was.
Absolutely. I'm sure everybody, was going up with like random fingers and glasses. That sentence sounds very strange, but if you know Gaz Regan, it's probably as strange as it sounds.
I'm sure.
Okay, so now you've mixed that up. It's all lovely and delicious. If you find that your ice level has gone too low, just top it up with a bit more ice. So you want your glass to be full of ice. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to get a potato peeler. And you're going to peel a section of the skin off your orange. So it should be like this. So as you can see, there's very little white on that. And the white is the pith. If you have too much white, it'll be too bitter. But what we're really interested in is on the outside, you'll see all of those bumps. They all have oil. So what we want to do is we're going to squeeze the orange skin on top of our cocktail. So my camera's probably not good enough, but I'm going to give a little squeeze there. And I don't know if you guys can see little tiny droplets of oil, but you're going to squeeze those out. So it's the outside of the skin, the bumpy bit over the glass, squeeze it on top, and then just do a little rimming around, and then you can rub the side of the glass. And then you're going to just do one final twist so you can make it a little bit pretty. So one final twist like this, and then just whack it in, and there you go. Now it may seem a bit strange that you're rubbing the rim and you're rubbing the outside of the glass, but what you're doing is you're actually coating the rim, the top of the drink, and the outside of the glass with the oils. So when you pick up your glass to drink it, those oils will stay on your fingers. So the oil on top, once you start drinking, that oil you'll drink the oil. So there'll be less oil. So to keep that orange aroma, it's good if you rim the top because it will stay on the rim and it'll stay on your fingers. So pro tip. But yeah, sláinte, guys.
Sláinte.
Get a lovely little whiff and a lovely little sip. Oh, yeah.
You can't beat an old-fashioned. I mean, is there a better cocktail? I mean,
I don't know.
You can go as fancy as you want, but nothing beats the classic, simple approach like this.
A spirit-forward drink. With this, you only really have like 3 other ingredients to compete with. One is the water, but that's all that's going to do is going to help you to find more of those flavors. A little bit of Angostura, a little bit of sugar. Like this is, I would say that you could put any whiskey into this cocktail and it's going to be a banger. But obviously, Dead Rabbit, that whole extra virgin American oak aging is really helping it to stand firm.
I've never had Dead Rabbit now in an old-fashioned, and I will say that biscuity pencil shavingness comes through even in the old-fashioned. And I love a sweeter, I love a fortified wine, and I love a sweeter cocktail. So the sweetness and that oak shaving is a lovely combination here. Yeah, it's a lovely cocktail.
And just that little bit of black pepper at the end as well. I really love when there's that little tiny bit of savory. I have a sweet tooth. But that tiny bit of savory, that's why there was that little bit of salt in the previous cocktail. But in this one, it's just the whiskey and it'll hold its own.
That's so good. That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I could drink that all night. I will drink it all night.
Yeah. So 2 very different styles of cocktails. Just to show you the versatility of how you can utilize Irish whiskey in cocktails. So you've had something that's kind of refreshing, citrusy, very, very accessible. And then now you've got something that's got, a little bit more bite, a lot more body. It's something that's, really coats the mouth. And it's a good sipper.
A great sipper. Okay, so we are moving at breakneck speed through alcohol, through whiskeys, through cocktails, and showing no signs of slowing down. And people are going to be surprised to know that we're 2.5 hours in and we're only 2 drinks in, 2 whiskeys in, 2 neat whiskeys in. We still have 1 to go.
Yep. Yes, we do. I hope you are all ready. Like I'm already very delighted.
I'm ready because I can sip on both a neat whiskey and an old fashioned simultaneously. So,
all right.
What have we got here? All right. So for the next one, I don't have a full bottle of it, but I have a sample of it. This is my sample, but you've got a bigger bottle.
Yes. So, if you want to have a little look, I apologize for my camera skills. Like they didn't hire me for my technical skills.
You're grand.
But yeah. So this is our beautiful Liberties Distillery bottle. Woo. So what we're tasting today is the Copper Alley, and so I'm going to kind of weave stories about the Liberties and about the different. So the Copper Alley comes from a family of whiskey we produce at Dublin Liberties Distillery called the Liberties range. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the names of the whiskies and what the stories are behind the name, and a little bit about the area, and then we'll go through a full tasting of the Copper Alley. So we might as well start with the Liberties. Now, I'm sure that you guys all know about the Liberties. It's an area within Dublin, but for the few of you who might not know, the Liberties is hugely important to Irish whiskey history. Oh Lord, you can tell that old fashioned is doing its job. But yeah, so integral to Irish whiskey history. So I will say that at one point, Irish whiskey ruled the world. Irish whiskey was responsible for 60% of global sales of whiskey. So we were outselling Scotch, outselling bourbon, outselling every other style of whiskey. If you walked into a bar anywhere in the world and said, "Hey, can I have a whiskey?" they would hand you an Irish. Now, this would have been in the 1800s during what we call the golden era of Irish whiskey. At that point, we were producing up to 10 million gallons per year. Now, if you've seen a map, you've seen how tiny Ireland is. So that is a massive production for such a very small piece of land. And at that point in the 1800s, Dublin was considered to be the central distillation point for the entire British Empire. Like they focused all of their distillation efforts into Dublin. So Irish whiskey was held in very high regard globally, but the best of Irish whiskey was considered to be made in Dublin. And a step above that, again, the best of Dublin whiskey was considered to be made in the Liberties. Now, in the 1800s, we have a wild and varied history within Dublin, but at one stage, the inner city of Dublin was walled. And the areas outside of that wall were usually given to people who were loyal to whoever was in charge. So at this stage, it would have been the British. So there was a piece of land that was given to an abbey. And essentially what happened was the abbey took control of this land. They could essentially do what they wanted. As long as it didn't kind of go directly against the people who were controlling Dublin City at the time. And so this area became known as the Liberties. So the police force for Dublin City would have been inside the walls. Outside the walls, it was sort of kind of like a no man's land. So outside of the walls is where they kind of pushed all of the unsavory elements. So this is where you had a lot of brewing, a lot of distilling, a lot of nefarious activities such as brothels, a lot of tanning, a lot of smelting. It was everything that was considered dirty was kind of pushed to the outskirts of the city. So outside of the city walls, the Liberties generally meant a good time. So within the Liberties, it's actually a really small area of Dublin. You can walk from one end to the other within like 15 minutes. But it was integral. It was integral to, the production of Irish whiskey, the growth of Irish whiskey. And, even when the walls came down from Dublin, that area still maintains the name of the Liberties. and it has become kind of like a cultural hub for Dublin. And there's a wild array of characters and story and history from this area. It's a very old area, and because that was essentially the heart of distillation during the golden age for Irish whiskey, through the Renaissance, there's definitely been like a revival. The heart is beating again. And, like the Dublin Liberties Distillery, you might have guessed from the name, but we're located in the Liberties. And we're located on a very famous street known as Mill Street, which actually comes up in one of the stories that I have to tell you guys later. But the building itself was used for a variety of different reasons. It is a very, very old building. I think it dates back to the 1400s. It was used at one stage as a tannery, so they would have skinned rabbits, which, dead rabbit, everything ties together, but they would have had a massive array of different skills and practices of people who would have lived there. And when we took over the building, we actually kept, there's a lot of the original stonework. So if you ever have the chance to go to Dublin and go to the Dublin Liberties Distillery, you're seeing a real piece of history. Like there's some of the original stone walls, the original facade of the building is still there. And there was a lot of care taken so that when we built the visitor center, that we didn't really damage or disrupt too much the original integrity of the building. So it's a really beautiful mix of modern and history. But yeah, so, Liberty is very, very important. And obviously, as I said, there was a lot of nefarious things that happened there. But the first entry into the family of the Liberties whiskey is the Oak Devil, which we're not tasting today. But the only reason that I mention it is because it is named after the fact that there was, I think it was a bog oak carving of the face of a devil was above the arch that led down into stairs, which led into the Liberties. And this was known as the entrance to hell. And so, like through the Liberties, each of the whiskeys, they have a name that's taken from a very vibrant part of the history of this area. And, we only have a couple of whiskeys on the line. Like the history of the Liberties is very rich and varied and quite insane. But yeah, so, Oak Devil, entrance into hell, that should set the tone. Now, I did notice earlier when Hugh Cooney was on that potentially there was concerns about the PG-ness of our stories. So
it's late enough, we're grand.
Are we okay? All right.
We're past the watershed now. We're past the lock-in watershed. We're 2.5 hours in.
That's it. All the kids are in bed. It's all good to go. Grant. All right.
Get your kids to bed, quick.
Focus on the brothels. Okay, so this is the story I tell in every tasting, by the way. I've got my PG tastings, and then I figured for stories and sips, we probably delve a little bit deeper beneath the grime of the Liberties. But before we get super into it, the next thing I want to talk about is Copper Alley. So this whiskey, delicious whiskey. It's definitely one of my favorite whiskeys that we produce at the Liberties Distillery, and I'll tell you why. So pour yourselves a dram. I'm going to have a super quick snapshot into how freaking delicious this is. And I'll probably start off with a very small story of the aging process. So basically what we have here is a single malt. It's beautiful. It's 10 years old. It's double distilled. It is oily. It is hefty. It is beautiful. It is aged in ex-bourbon, and then we take it out and we finish it off in sherry barrels. So let me just, hold on. I have to get this story straight now. So Oloroso sherry casks, but they're not your standard Oloroso sherry casks. So the story goes, and I know that Daryl was on here earlier, so he might correct me in the story, but this is the story that he told me, all right? So basically, you've met Daryl. Daryl is lovely. As I said, he is a ledge bag. He's also very charming. Daryl goes over to Spain to a bodega, and he's over there to pick out some casks. He stays with this family who own this bodega. They're, having dinner, they're chatting away. Daryl notices these very old, beautiful casks in the house. And Daryl's like, they're very nice casks. What are they for? And the host was like, well, our family has had these for many years, and they're basically heirlooms. So these giant sherry butts, they were 30 years old. So they had been aging sherry, Oloroso sherry, for 30 years. Daryl was like, that's very interesting. Can I have some? And they were like, ah, no, family heirloom. Not even, no. You can have the other barrels that are outside. You can't have these family heirloom. No. They have dinner. They have a couple of drinks. Daryl is Irish and very charming. Somehow Daryl left with some of those barrels. I don't know what happened. I just know that
Is he still on the run?
I don't know. Like, maybe I'm not supposed to be telling this story, but basically,
I think maybe the statute of limitations is up on his grand theft Oloroso.
It's fine. I won't give you his surname just in case. But yeah, so basically Daryl acquires these heirlooms, which are, these massive, musty, delicious 30 years aging Oloroso sherry. Like, that's insane. So he gets a couple of these casks, and that's where these beauties come into play. So essentially, they're aged for 10 years. We age them in ex-bourbon. We take them out and we whack them into these beautiful, musty, old, delicious, potentially stolen. Definitely not stolen, though. But
Daryl's response is wink, wink. So we can't confirm nor deny the theft of Oloroso sherry casks from Spain.
It was such a professional answer, Not confirming, not denying. Anyway, so I mean, this is stories and tips. So take whatever I say. So beautiful whiskey. So yeah, aged in those, fantastic, musty, delicious. I know I keep saying musty, but like, honestly, when you have a sniff and a taste of this whiskey, it really is, you kind of get like, it's going to sound very strange. I don't want anyone to be put off, but it's almost like being in a grandma's house.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
It's that kind of like, it's kind of like, it's musty. It's like a cupboard you haven't opened in a while, but it's also in that cupboard, there's like the Christmas cake from last Christmas. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That's what it is. It's Christmas cake in a cupboard in your grandma's house. And that doesn't sound very enticing, but I'm telling you now, once you smell it and you drink it.
How did that not make it to the marketing material? I mean, such an eloquent description of it. I'm surprised it's not on the bottle. It's like your grandmother's cupboard. Here you go, $100, please.
Spend all your money to taste what your grandma's cupboard. No, I mean, obviously you have all of those, the traditional tasting notes, which everyone will pick up on. You've got all of those beautiful dried fruits. You've got some dried apricots, a lot of dried raisins, all of that Christmas. There's almost like a stouty nose, stout on the nose. It's beautiful. It is rich. It is decadent. It's a chewer. You're taking a little sloop, and it hangs around on the palate in a very pleasant way. It's almost like treacle.
I know what you mean when you say musty.
And it's bottled at 46% ABV.
I mean, you describe musty as grandmother's cupboard. Like, to me, I've often associated that note with them walking into a cellar and the smell you get in a cellar of a distillery cellar or an old business cellar where there's kind of wood and water and rain, and that's all in there in the one place. That's what I'm getting in a lovely way on this note. Lovely mustiness of wood, water. Yeah. In the best way. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas, when you had Dead Rabbit, it was like pencil shavings. This is like, if you're in a forest and you find a bit of wood from an old door or something. I'm really not selling this very well. I'm so sorry. Please don't.
Old door, grandmother's cupboard, old door, musty.
I love it. It's one of those, it's such a complex, rich whiskey. And it's one of those whiskeys that, you take your time with it. It's 46%. You don't need to rush anywhere. It's got a beautiful big nose, full body. It's got that beautiful coating on the mouth. It's got a really lovely finish. It's and it's a little bit sweet.
Is there a cherry note to it?
Yes, like those almost like the maraschino cherries. It's just it's divine.
There's many people are won over by your grandmother's description of your grandmother's cupboard and are already writing checks to their local liquor store, but they're asking when will this be available in Southern California. Martin has weighed in there. This will be available online for sale in the United States in the next 2 weeks and in store in California shortly after. So stay tuned on that, and we'll put some details in the Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group too. We'll put this availability currently, and I'll put some links in there tomorrow for where you can purchase this online in the United States right now. YouTube doesn't like us to put them on our screen here, but we'll put them in the Facebook group tomorrow. So for those of you who are looking for these 3 whiskies, you'll find links to purchase them, even if they're not in your state. Steph, people want to hang out with you when they go to Ireland. So you're building up a fan group of people who are just going to follow you around like the cat, and you'll have to feed them, and you have to make cocktails for them, whether you like it or not.
Amazing. You can get some more of my very professional tasting notes if we go drinking whiskey in the park. But yeah, so I don't know who has a little sample of this right now, but if you are drinking it, I really hope you're enjoying it. But also, this is one of those whiskeys, as I said, take your time, 46%. It's a very, very it's a very rich Moorish kind of a whiskey. So this is one of the ones that I'm going to kind of sip a little and I'm going to talk a little. So I promised you some stories about the Liberties. And this is called Copper Alley. So Copper Alley is a street within the area of the Liberties. Now, the official, very PG story of why it's called the Copper Alley is that the first coin that was minted in Dublin in the 17th century was supposedly minted on this street. Now, the label, which you can see here, it's very beautiful. It's very decadent. It's very Gothic almost. So you've got a lot of that lovely rich color of the copper there. You've got the beautiful type font. It's all very lovely. It speaks a lot to the heritage. It's all very beautiful. Now, let me destroy that image for you with some of the real stories of the Liberty. So, official story, first coin, wonderful. The less savory story is that it was called Copper Alley because they had pieces of copper on the floor to guide you to secret brothels. Now, these brothels were considered to be the best brothels in Dublin. Pretty strange area. Now, I'm going to focus on one brothel owner in particular. Some of you may have heard of her name before. If you're ever in Dublin, there is actually a pub named after this woman. And I think it's a pub/hostel. So you can stay there also if you want. And it's right.
Hostel, you said. Hostel. You did say hostel.
Did I say hostel? Oh God.
You did say hostel, not to be confused with the previous incarnation of the name.
Copper. Just follow the copper. I'd like to point out that this is all in the 17th century, 16th, 17th century. So, we're all above board to Dublin right now. Everything is very PG. But back then, so basically there was a very, very famous brothel owner, possibly the most famous brothel owner in Ireland, and her name was Darky Kelly. Now, Darky Kelly was a feisty lady, as you can imagine any brothel owner would be, and she allegedly was impregnated by the Sheriff of Dublin. Now, as you can imagine, the Sheriff of Dublin probably doesn't want to have it known that he fathered a child with, the infamous brothel owner, Darky Kelly. So he completely denied it. He was like, I've no idea. This woman is insane. Now, the story of the legend goes that she was like, I'm outing you. That's it. I have the proof. That's it. We're done. So he kidnapped the child. And according to legend, he sacrificed the child in a satanic ritual. Now, this is all insane when you, as someone who grew up in Dublin, walking the streets of Dublin, this story is bonkers. But this is the legend. So he sacrifices the baby in a satanic ritual, and here's the kicker, accuses her of murdering the baby in witchcraft. Now, as we all know, if you point out and say witch, only bad things will happen. So unfortunately, Darky Kelly was tried and executed as a witch. And it is said that her ghost roams the area around Copper Alley to this day. Now, if we take a step back from the legend of Darky Kelly, apparently there are newspaper reports that indicate that potentially, they just casually found bodies of 5 different men in the brothel that she ran. So, it could have been that. Could have been the reason why she was executed. It could have been that potentially she's a witch. So, it's just one of those things where there's 2 different stories.
She's a witch.
Yeah, I think that she's a witch is definitely much more entertaining when you don't have TV. So
it makes for a better Monty Python movie. There's a great podcast from a couple of comedians in Ireland. It's called Shite Talk History. And I don't know if you've ever come across it, but it's brilliant. And it's 2 Irish lads, and they pull up ancient old stories from going back 600 or 700 years, and then maybe as recently as 50 years, but they have an episode on Darky Kelly, and I pulled it up here as you were talking, Stephen. It's called Darky Kelly, the Murdering Madam of Maiden Tower. And it goes into detail. I remember listening to it as I was driving one day, and it's a funny story. Well, not a funny story. It's hilariously told. It's a dark story, hilariously told. And so check that out. Shite Talk History. Darky Kelly has a great story on it. But anyway,
I'm going to check out that podcast for tips for my next whiskey tasting.
It's so good.
Amazing. Okay. So the next story I wanted to tell you guys about is a story that you've probably heard before, but it's one of my favorite Irish whiskey stories. And I feel like I can't talk about Irish whiskey without talking about this story in particular. And this is the giant river of fire that ran through the Liberties, which I'm sure that everybody has heard of.
Our great Irish pride. We're so proud of this story in Ireland. We're so proud of it.
It's just one of those things, you know. You can't talk about Irish whiskey. You can't talk about the Liberties without talking about the River of Fire. And one of the fascinating things that I found out about this is that, you know, if you're in any way a fan of Irish whiskey history, especially if you grow up in Dublin, you're going to hear about the Great Fire. However, what I didn't know was that the River of Fire actually ran directly in front of the distillery. So that was the street that the River of Fire ran down. So this is how central Dublin Liberties Distillery is to, you know, the centre of distillation in the golden era, is that the River of Fire that happened in Dublin in 1875 ran right past our front door. So for those of you who don't know, June 15th, 1875, if you can imagine, we're in the 18th century. Sanitation isn't very good. Everything's overcrowded. Most things are made of wood. No one really, you know, cares. We're in the Liberties. Everything's kind of loosey-goosey. And there was randomly, like, no one really knows what happened. They did a check. It was fine. 45 minutes later, there's a massive explosion. 5,000 barrels on fire. River of fire whiskey going down the street outside of our distillery. So it was 400 meters long. It was 6 inches deep. And, you know, like 24 people were hospitalized. 13 people died, right? But not for the reasons that you think. No one died from burns. People died because they were like, well, we can't let the whiskey go to waste. The river of whiskey that was on fire running through the streets of, you know, medieval Dublin with no sanitation. And they were like, this is grand. There's reports of police that were like, I saw people taking off their boots and using it to scoop up whiskey that was on fire to drink it. So the people that died from like foul alcohol poisoning. And what I thought was hilarious is that, like, you know, there's this river of fire and everyone's kind of like, well, we'll just drink it. It's grand. And then there's like one policeman who's like, we should probably stop the fire considering we're very overcrowded and everything is wooden. And he had the great idea of, because, you know, in medieval times, you would have kept your pigs right outside your house, and you would have kept your cows quite near you. So he basically just collected a load of animal dung and tried to build a wall to stop it from spreading more, while people are like, you know, taking pots and pans and their shoes and whatever they could, you know, lift the whiskey up with and drink it. But yeah, it was wild. So it caused, like, you know, in today's standard of money, it would have been about 6 million euros worth of damage. And that's why we're not really allowed to, we can't be trusted now to age whiskey within Dublin City. Now, if you've ever lived in Dublin, you'll understand that the rent is really high. So, like, thank God that they made it illegal to age. But, like, you know, we can't be trusted to keep it near the city walls. So
there's still families in Dublin. Like, I'm sure there's still families who sit around the table at dinner and they're like, geez, that was a great day. Do you remember Granddad telling us about that day he got the pot from grandma, and he brought the pot out, and wasn't he drinking whiskey for the day? God love him. And then we got the horse poop, and we built a wall with the horse poop. Do you remember that? Still proud, like.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'd say, you know, like, as you said, like, as an Irish person talking about Irish whiskey, I'm like, let me tell you about this story. And it's like, whenever you talk about whiskey history, it's the first story, you know?
This is like, you're in Dublin right now, and you have told this story to many nationalities. I am here in America trying to change the perception of the drunken Irish person. And here you roll in with your story of taking off shoes and boots and getting flower pots and all kinds of things to drink whiskey that's on fire just for fear that it would go down the drain before you had a chance to drink it. You've just undone 5 years of my work over here.
I have a dead rabbit related story which will also cement the stereotype that Irish people perhaps are a little fond of their alcohol. So I never actually got into why the Dead Rabbit bar or whiskey is named the Dead Rabbit. So for those of you who don't know, there was a gang in the 1800s in New York that was made up of Irish immigrants, and it was called the Dead Rabbit Gang. Now, in the 1800s, we had a lot of issues going on. Primarily, we had famine, and so that resulted in a lot of Irish people going, you know what, we're best off getting on a ship and like crossing our fingers and hoping America's better. So they land in America. Now, at that time, a lot of the rural Irish people would have still spoken Oscuelga. They would have been speaking in Irish. So when they landed in the US, their English skills were quite poor. So if you imagine, you've got tens of thousands of people landing day by day in a foreign country. They don't speak the language. They haven't got a penny to their name. They've the clothes on their back. And this started a little bit of resentment for the immigrants, okay? So you had they deemed themselves the native-born Americans. And these would have been people who were born on US soil. And, you know, they might have only been 2 or 3 generations born, but they were born on American soil, and by the gods were they going to defend it. So what happened was the Irish immigrants, along with many other immigrants of Polish or Italian nationality, they were kind of forced into what you would consider to be almost ghetto-like. There were slums. They were actually considered the worst slums in the Western world at that time period. But it was in the 5 Points. And that land used to be on swamp. It was reclaimed swampland. So if you can imagine, reclaimed swampland does not make good tenement buildings, okay? So it's slightly boggy. Who would have ever thought? But basically, they had poor sanitation. The buildings are falling all over the place. No one knows what's going on. And so you've got all of these Irish immigrants crammed in like a hen, you know, just mushed in. And the police didn't want to take responsibility for them. And so what ended up happening was when we talk about the gangs of, you know, like the Dead Rabbit Gang or any other gangs from immigrants at that time period, it wasn't the same connotation as you would have nowadays for a gang. The gangs were a way for the Irish immigrants and other immigrants of other nationalities for them to pool resources and protect themselves, because the police had absolutely no interest in going into this swampy, unsanitary, overcrowded, you know, mess. They were like, nope, it's fine. The problems will sort themselves. As long as the immigrants stay in the immigrant land, we're totally fine. So the gangs were a way for, you know, the young men who were able to physically protect, the young men who were able to try to find work, and they were the protection for the Irish immigrants in America. So, you know, the Dead Rabbit Gang, it was a very different idea of what a gang was at that time period. So, you know, there's a lot of stories about the Dead Rabbit Gang. You know, they're pretty intense. They're a pretty interesting group of people. But my favorite story is so, you know, they wanted to protect the Irish immigrants. Their main rivals were a gang called the Bowery Boys, who were native borns and very anti-immigrant, very anti-Irish, anti-Catholic, etc., etc. And there was a lot of clashes between the two of them. Now, at one stage, the Dead Rabbit Boys were like, do you know what? We've had enough of this. We're going to hit him. We're going to hit him hard where it hurts. So they waited until it was July 4th, Independence Day, when the Bowery lads are with their families celebrating, and they decided they were going to do a raid on the main Bowery Boys clubhouse. Okay? So they break into the clubhouse because no one's there. They're all celebrating. They go in, they ransack the place. They rip up the dance floor so that they can't dance. They break all of the furniture so they have no furniture. And most importantly, and this is how you know they're Irish, they drank every drop of liquid in that bar. They leave. They go on up back to the 5 Points. Bowery Boys come back after their lovely day with families and celebrations to find that their clubhouse is destroyed. So they're all up in arms. The Dead Rabbit Gang's all up in arms. They're calling the other Irish immigrant gangs. And then you have what they call the Dead Rabbit Riots. Now, these were intense, okay, because you essentially had gathered all of the Irish immigrant gangs together against all of the native born gangs together, and you had these riots, and it's estimated that they had up to 5,000 people rioting on this street. A couple of times the police tried to intervene. Every time the police came out, all of the gangs, regardless of what side they were on, were against the police. So the police were like, you know what, after like 2 or 3 attempts, they were like, we're out of this. We'll leave them to it, and we'll try and see what happens. This one police guy decides, he's like, you know what? I know how to solve this. He's like, I'll get in, I'll speak to the 2 leaders, I'll calm everything down. So this very young, obviously aspiring police guard goes into the midst of this riot. He finds the 2 leaders. He's trying to like break up the gangs, and the gangs are like, what are you doing here? So what they did was they actually stripped him down to his underwear and sent him back to the police station with a note that they should leave them alone. The only way that they ended up ending these riots was by calling in the military. So at this point, up until this point in history, which I think it was 1847, they were the largest riots that had ever been seen in New York. Like, it was insane. And all of this started because the Irish were like, well, we don't want to be pushed around anymore. Off they go, drink all the booze, wreck everything out. And then
Is it true? I don't know if this is a true fact or not, but my understanding was that all those riots kicked off because the whiskey notes tasted like a grandmother's cupboard. And that just created all kinds of havoc, and people are arguing over flavor profiles. And that was the end of it. Like, people died because of it. Is that true or no?
Well, I mean, like, it depends on like who you want to believe. There are some journalists that do believe that, but I like that. I like the story of like, we just went in and drank all of their liquid, regardless of flavor notes.
They didn't have the benefit and the joy of your particular nose or tasting notes to guide them.
If I had gone in to do a tasting, there would have been no riots that day, I tell you. But who's even like, at that point they're just confused. They're like, did she really say a grandmother's cupboard? She did, yeah. Oh God.
I love my grandmother. I love this whiskey. I love my grandmother, so I love this whiskey.
Yeah, it's a delicious brand.
I mean, the dead rabbit then, the dead rabbit that we think of as the bar today I think is about to explode, and there's about to be so much more that we hear about from the dead rabbit. The dead rabbit, I think the goal is not for it to be a bar, but it's a movement. It's a state of mind. It's a media company. There's a lot more than just, I think the bar is one element, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, as I said at the very beginning, they were like almost the crest of the wave of this renaissance of Irish whiskey that we're going through right now. They were integral into introducing people to the versatility. And, at that point, that would have been when there were only a handful of distilleries operating, and they were still able to showcase, the wide breadth and range of Irish whiskey that was available at that point. So you can only imagine that now we're in 2021, and, there's a distillery within arm's reach no matter where you are, so it's a very exciting time. And I do think that the dead rabbit as a whole has a really big part to play in that.
We've had Jack McGarry on in the past, and we were delighted to hear from Jack, and what was fascinating to me to learn, because I'm fascinated by anybody who has the gumption and the risk tolerance to start a business, let alone a bar in New York, but his approach and him describing the attention to detail and the lengths they go to, and you've seen this, and the way they'll test a cocktail 100 different times and 100 different ways, and how they approach their Guinness, their Irish breakfast, their Irish coffees, their cocktails. What you finally get on the bar counter or in your, as in today's world, your takeaway packs, is the result of months and sometimes years of fine tuning and a little bit better here, and like with the Guinness, like bringing in Guinness experts from Ireland, and like there's just that level of, it's almost maniacal focus on, but can't we do a little bit better? And that's astonishing. So I think that for anyone has any interest in Ireland, Irish whiskey, Irish culture, just watching them take this to the next level and really, if this is even a word, contemporaryize it. Make Irishness more contemporary, because you're not going to go into the Dead Rabbit and find shamrocks and shillelaghs, but you will find great pride around our produce and what we can do, which I think is lovely. Yeah.
And, I feel like it has one of those integral, like I've traveled, to many different countries, and as a bartender, I'm always in bars and talking to bartenders. And I do feel like in Ireland, there's just this indescribable atmosphere that you'll always find with Irish people in a setting with alcohol usually, but like, you know, there's always this energy that when you gather Irish people together that you just don't really find anywhere else in the world. And I feel like that's what Jack and Sean, you know, their crazy attention to detail is phenomenal, but the way that they're able to actually, you know, breathe life into the dead rabbit, because if you're there, you get that same energy, you get that same feeling as if you were in a bar in Ireland. You know, and
I agree with you that energy is palpable. Like when you walk into the Dead Rabbit, anytime we've been there, it's been jammed wall to wall. Like as soon as they open, it's jammed. And I remember looking back, like thinking about it now in the current world we live in, how I wish to be back in that moment where I might have complained about how busy it was. No. Now I want to be in a pub that's so busy that I am being elbowed and jostled, and there's, you know, I'm barely able to find my seat. Don't we long for those moments now?
Have a seat.
Like even have a seat. You know, those are moments now. We took that for granted, didn't we?
Yeah. I'm sorely missing bars, I tell you, because in Ireland, you know, the proper pubs now they've been shut a long while. They've been shut since March, so it's unreal. You know, it's definitely something I miss. I mean,
all we were used to growing up was that the pub might close on Christmas Day or Good Friday. It might. It probably didn't. But like to think that it'll be closed a year is just, I know. It's amazing. It's astonishing times. Steph, one of the things we do here on the lock-in, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but one of the things we do is we ask our guests to contribute either a toast or a song. And the best guests of all have always given a song, I'll tell you that. Whether it's a verse, a bar, an entire song, but doesn't every self-respecting Irish person have an old tune in their back pocket on the occasion that they get asked to produce it? What say you?
I feel like I'm flattered and honored, but like I feel like you've asked me this without ever hearing me sing before, and I feel like that's a crucial mistake that you've made. But I think I'm very embarrassed about this. I do not have the singing cadence that you would associate with an Irish whiskey drinker.
But without even, let's say you did have the cadence, what would you sing?
Probably Raglan Road. It's just one of those tunes, you know. It's for me. It was kind of like one of the first songs that we learned in school. It's just one of those, like, no matter what bar you end up in, someone will always crack out with Raglan Road because it's a classic, and it is the most quintessentially like Irish song that I can think of, and it's very close to my heart. But I am not a singer.
Steph, take it away. Take it away.
Oh my god!
Would you attempt the butchering of a verse of it? Like, even this is
sure.
not, you know.
I'll butcher it, but like I feel terrible that this is recorded, and everyone listening, I do apologize.
We're in a lock-in. This is the end of the night in a lock-in. We all know the next step is breakfast. So all we got to do is bash out an old tune, and nobody cares whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
Okay. Oh God, I'm so embarrassed. I've never been asked this before.
You've never been on Stories and Sips before either.
Oh God. Oh, I can feel, you know, like I can talk about whiskey all day. It comes to singing, and suddenly the tout pops up, you know. Okay. I'm so sorry. Oh God, no, I'm so embarrassed. Okay, I have this. Barry, maybe it'll help if you sang with me.
Well, the challenge is that this is not like the Guinness gig rig or the 2FM beat on the street kind of audio capabilities. So we have one audio track which either comes from you or me, and if we both sing, all people hear is.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna attempt this now, and I'm really sorry, everybody. Okay.
You can do this. I believe in you.
Okay. On Raglan Road, on an autumn day, I saw her first and knew that her dark hair would weave a snare that I might one day rue. I saw the danger and I passed along the enchanted way. And I said likely we are falling at the dawning of the day. Oh, Lord.
Yes. All right. That was beautiful. Great job. Look at all this. Look, beautiful. Great job, Stephanie. Look, people are loving it. And why wouldn't they? That was look, a lock-in is about an authentic expression of self. And you did it.
Oh my God. Well, thanks. You know, this is honestly the first time I've ever sang in front of like anyone. So this has been a unique experience for me. So thank you.
You have
and thank everybody for your kind words.
look at all these coming in. Look at all these comments. Wow, great job from Johnny McNally, Rebecca, bravo, John Byrne, well done, Sláinte. Look, you think you don't have a voice, but we're not. This isn't a singing contest. It's about, can we just join in for the crack? And you did it. Yeah. You absolutely did it. Look, Daryl from the sidelines, master distiller at the Dublin Liberties Distillery, has shared a toast with us. A lovely toast. And he said, here's to cheating, here's to stealing, here's to fighting, and here's to drinking. If you're going to cheat, make sure you cheat death. If you're going to steal, make sure it's to steal your sweetheart away. If you're going to fight, then fight for your fellow Irishmen. And if you're going to drink, then drink the dead rabbit with Stephanie. As simple as that. It doesn't get better than that. And right on cue, Stephanie's camera has frozen. But what an amazing contribution Stephanie has given to us with her cocktails and her whiskey knowledge and her knowledge of Dublin and the Dublin Liberties Distillery. What a night we've had. While Stephanie stays frozen there on our screen, while her internet might reboot a bit there, and we'll bring her back in. What an amazing night we've had. Honestly, we have gone through 3 great whiskies, 2 great cocktails. We started off with the Dubliner bourbon cask, blended whiskey, bottled there at 40%. We then moved on to the Dead Rabbit at 44% ABV, another blended whiskey. Again, these are both malt and grain blends, 5-year-old whiskey here. And then we moved on to our cocktails. We had we had 2 cocktails tonight. We had the maple old fashioned, and we also had what else did we have? The dive ball. And then we finally ended up with the Copper Alley 10-year-old single malt from Dublin Liberties Distillery. So, what a great night. Great music, great chat. We had the best and longest story ever told about a man and his Tay, the Tay man. I don't think we'll ever top the Tay man story. That was a unique one. And I'd like to dive more into the psychology behind that story, to be honest. But that was something very special. All right, let me look at the comments here. That was gorgeous. Steph singing, it was lovely. A toast, we brought in a toast there from Daryl. Richard wants me to sing us out. The Contender, he wants the Contender. All right, we'll sing out with the Contender, Richard's favorite song. The Tay Man, says Chris. There almost needs to be a song, The Tay Man. But yeah, listen, we've had a great night to start off our 2021 season of the Lock-In. When the pubs open up again, we are still going to be doing our lock-in. There's always room for us to share the stories and the sips of Irish whiskey and to bring entertaining characters and people to the fore here, like to introduce people to you. And I think you'll all agree that didn't Caitriona do an incredible job of touring us around the Dublin Liberties Distillery at the start of the night tonight? Blown away by that. Super impressed by Caitriona. And I think, I don't know about you, but I'd love to have all of our guests back on again because they really kicked us off in style tonight. The rest of the year is going to be more lock-ins, more guests, more crack. These are not academic tasting nights. These are nights where we tell stories, we sing songs, we drink great whiskey, we learn about them, we meet the great people behind Irish whiskey. But most of all, we just come together and we form a community that shares a common love for Ireland and Irish whiskey. And I think this is one of the greatest communities I've ever been part of, the greatest community I've ever been part of. Lucky enough to call you all virtual friends and in-person friends. Can't wait to do it all in person, but not going to stop doing it virtually for the foreseeable future, if at all. So we're going to keep doing this as long as we possibly can. I do recommend that you keep a lookout for any of the 3 whiskies that we had tonight. I'll post some links in the group tomorrow in the Facebook group, Irish Whiskey Fans of America. There are some online services that ship these 3 whiskies to different states. So I'll post those in the group. Really recommend you check them out. Thank you to the Dublin Liberties Distillery for supporting us and for supplying us with such great guests tonight. And we've had, I think, looking like in the comments, I think you'll all agree, we've had a great night. Johnny says, you keep setting the bar high. Thank you. Yeah, look, this is my highlight. This is the highlight of my week every Friday, and I live for these Fridays. And so while it's a bit of work pulling it together, I don't know. I don't think there's anything else I'd rather be doing. All right. So I think Tyler says, great night in Ohio. That's awesome. And, you know, Susie wondering, when am I back in Columbus? All of my tastings and events are going to be virtual for the foreseeable future. We're doing a lot of corporate events and private events for businesses and for groups at the moment. And coming up to St. Patrick's Day, we're doing a lot of tastings. Those of you who live in Columbus and who live in Ohio, we do almost weekly Ohio events. If you're in Ohio, go to irishwhiskeyohio.com and register for all of our events that take place there. We're not going to be doing in-person tastings for a while. We'll wait until it's safe to bring people together. While we all love whiskey and we all love Ireland, let me tell you, there is nothing that is worth risking our health. Believe it or not, there is no whiskey in the world that's worth risking our health or our safety for. So we're going to continue to come together virtually until it is safe to do so in person. And I think you'd all agree that's probably the most prudent approach at the moment. Stephanie's back. She hasn't left us.
Hi, I'm so sorry. So I've never actually been on my laptop at 3 a.m. and it just decided that it was going to choose this exact moment to update all of its services. And I tried to connect from my phone, but it didn't let me connect. So
I think you're back for another song. And my understanding is that you said, I forgot to sing that one song that I love so much. I better go back on there and sing that.
Sorry. I feel like one song in like a very long time. You're the only person that's ever wrung a song out of me. So I feel like I've songed it. That's my quota for this decade.
Don't blame me. Blame the audience here who insists that they be sung to. They're like, dance for the man, and they throw down coins, and we must dance for them immediately.
So this is what YouTube is all about. This is what it means to be an influencer.
Listen, all we do, we don't do any hard work here. People have said, oh, you're doing great work here. I say, no. I only open the bottles, and that's all. Once I open the bottles, that's all I do, and I drink it. I'm not doing any hard work. Everybody else does the hard work. Okay, so in the comments, people are loving the songs, the tunes. We talked there while you were off, Steph, about us all being in person at some point. And look, we'll all be in Ireland at some point, because I'll charter a plane and bring us all over there. At some point, we'll all land in Dublin and head straight to the Dublin Liberties Distillery, and it'll be like an onslaught. You won't know what hit you. Distilling will be paused for a month while we arrive upon it.
Just drinking directly from the stills.
That's it. It'll be. I remember somebody told me during the week. They said when this is all over, it'll be like the Roaring '20s. There'll be no rules. Yeah. There'll be people lying in the gutters drinking out of the drain pipes. Like, it'll be that kind of a thing. But yeah,
from shoes.
And shoes and flower pots and pots and pans, and we'll be thankful for it. Listen, you've been a legend, or a ledge bag. Let's be honest, a new word for my lexicon that will be used forevermore. You're a ledge bag, so maybe you'll come back again. Would you come back again and do a spot with us?
Absolutely. I feel like if I came back, I would definitely like brush up on my my Dublin song knowledge, because that blindsided me completely. But yes, Barry, I'd absolutely love to come back again and tell you.
We would love to have you. I see some co-hosting opportunities in our future, and hopefully you'd be so nice as to co-host a lock-in in the future, and we'll have a session and have a bit of crack and get people jumping up and down with a few tunes and a bit of Irish whiskey.
That sounds absolutely glorious.
Amazing. Steph, thanks a million for joining us. We'll let you go.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a million. You're a ledge bag.
You too, Barry. I'm really glad I brought that to your life.
You did.
Guys. Thank you.
Gotcha. Thanks, Steph. All right. We're at the end of our lock-in. We're going to sing out with one song. Thanks to Richard. He wants to hear The Contender. Who doesn't? Great old tune. Made famous by, Christy Moore sang it a lot, and Jimmy McCarthy wrote the lyrics, but it's a song about a famous boxer called Jack Doyle from Cork, from Cove, in fact, where I'm from, a man that a good reminder at the end of a night of drinking whiskey that whiskey can be a great lubricant for our night and can be a great catalyst for conversation and community, but we must not let it get the better of us. And when we think it might get the better of us, we should maybe ask a friend to help us out, or a family member. And poor Jack Doyle, the famous boxer at the turn of the century in the 1920s, didn't have anyone to help him, and he rose to the dizzying heights of the best of the boxers in the world and one of the best singers in the world, and sold out Carnegie Hall and many boxing events. But sadly, the drink got the better of him. So we sing this song both to appreciate great accolades and achievements from Irish people, but also to recognize that everything needs to be in moderation. As simple as that. All right. So we'll sing you out with this. Oh, when I was young and I was in my day, I could steal what woman's heart there was away. Sing and dance until the morning, blaze a tale until the dawning, long before I was the man you see today. And I was born beneath the star that promised all. I could have lived my life between Cork Cove and Youghal, but the wheel of fortune took me. From the highest point she shook me. By the bottle live and by the bottle I shall fall. But there on the mirror on the wall, I see the dream is fading, from the contender to the fall. The ring, the rose, the matador is raving. When I die, I'll die a drunk down on the street. You can count me out to 10 in clear defeat. Wrap the starry plough around me, let the piper's air resound me. There I'll rest until the Lord of Love I'll meet. But there in the mirror on the wall, I see the dream is fading, from the contender to the brawl. The ring, the rose, the matador is raving. When I die, I'll die a drunk down on the street. You can count me out to 10 in clear defeat. Wrap the starry plough around me, let the piper's air resound me. There I lay until the Lord of Love I'll meet. But there in the mirror on the wall, I see the dream is fading, from the contender to the brawl. The ring, the rose, the matador is raving. Oh, when I was young and I was in my day, I could steal what woman's heart there was away. Sing and dance until the dawning, blaze a trail until the morning, long before I was the man you see today. Long before I was the man you see today. Sláinte everybody. We had a great night. A great old night. Sláinte everybody. We'll see you back here next week. We've got more great tunes, great sips, great stories in store for all of us. Thanks for being such great company tonight. And can't wait to hang out with you again next week. Sláinte.